You begin in a kind of darkness that does not frighten, only settles, a darkness shaped by ash, cold dawn, and the invisible pause before engines wake. The front is quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that stretches thin across ruined fields and the ribs of burned-out factories. Breath rises in faint silver wisps. Frost clings to the metal of grounded aircraft, turning them pale under the first light. Before you drift off, take a moment to subscribe, but only if stories carried on quiet wings are your kind of thing. And if you feel like sharing, tell us where you're listening from, or which moment of her sky stayed with you the longest. You're listening to Echoes of War. They move slowly through this half-light, mechanics with stiff fingers, sentries stamping their boots, pilots pulling scarves up against the cold. Every sound feels dampened, every gesture controlled, as though the world itself is trying not to disturb whatever waits above the horizon. You stand with them in the muted stillness as a single engine coughs somewhere down the line, struggling toward life. The sound vibrates through the earth, through the soles of your boots, through the ribs of each machine waiting to be touched by sunlight. A breath drawn, a breath held. The thin light catches the edge of the hangar roof. Somewhere in this expanse of metal and silence, a girl from Moscow once stepped forward and entered the sky. They knew her as Lilya Litvyak, though the name meant little at first, just another young face among many, pale hair tucked beneath a cap, eyes deeper than her years suggested. She carried herself quietly, the way someone carries a secret they do not yet understand. She moved through the world with the stillness of someone who listens before she speaks. The war, however, does not listen. It simply takes. And it took everything around her before she ever touched the front. You follow her back to Moscow, before the firestorms, before the hammer of invasion. The city breathes differently then, tramlines humming, snow gathering softly on rooftops, the winter sun lingering behind thin clouds. She lives in a small apartment with books, sketches, and the sound of the radio drifting through the hallway. The sky above the city is quiet, large, unbroken. They remember her walking home from school with her gaze lifted toward the contrails of training flights. While others memorized poems or whispered secrets in doorways, she traced the shape of wings against the pale winter sun. She sketched clouds in margins. She pressed her palm to cold window glass whenever aircraft passed overhead. You sense a kind of longing there, not for speed or glory, but for altitude itself, for the simple distance between ground and sky. Before the war took shape, she found an aero club. Before fear found her, she found a cockpit. Before the world demanded endurance, she discovered the silence between layers of cloud. They trained her, at first, with hesitation. A girl small enough that some wondered whether she could even handle the weight of control surfaces in heavy wind. But she moved through her lessons with an attention that unsettled those watching, patient, observant, quiet in her confidence. Flying did not thrill her. Flying steadied her. And in the hush of early morning lessons, suspended between frost and rising light, she felt something close to peace. The world fractured in 1941. You feel the ground shift under her feet, news whispered in doorways, radios suddenly sharper, entire neighborhoods watching dark plumes rise along the western horizon. Streets once filled with pedestrians now fill with evacuees. Maps change shape. Children learn new words: occupation, retreat, siege. They lose aircraft by the hundreds in the first days. They lose pilots faster than names can be written down. They lose entire cities in the space of a breath. The sky, once her refuge, becomes a place of smoke, tracer fire, and loss. You watch the moment she steps forward when Raskova calls for new regiments. No ceremony surrounds it. No bold proclamation. Just a quiet nod, a small bag of belongings, and a determination that does not need to be spoken. They train her again, this time in cold barracks, with uniforms too heavy and schedules too sharp. They measure her endurance, her steady hands, her ability to read the sky like scripture. She passes through each trial not with bravado, but with a calm that others lean toward without understanding. And when the order comes for Stalingrad, she does not flinch. You feel the breath she takes before boarding the truck. Thin, cold, measured. The kind of breath someone takes when they know the world is changing shape around them. Stalingrad does not welcome them. It swallows. You follow her into a ruined airfield where metal groans under frost and the horizon pulses with red light from burning warehouses. The air tastes of ash and fuel. Every step is a negotiation with debris, smoke, and the knowledge that nothing here waits to be saved. They scatter into trenches when bombers pass overhead. They repair aircraft by lantern light. They sleep in bursts, always half listening to the rumble of distant artillery. You feel how she absorbs the landscape without resisting it, the broken silhouettes of factories, the drifting ash, the muted cries that roll over the Volga when explosions echo across the water. She belongs to the sky, but here the sky is never still. Her first sorties are not marked by triumph. They are marked by survival. She climbs through air that trembles with smoke and sunlight filtered through shrapnel haze. She watches tracers arc like brief, terrible constellations. She learns the intimate language of fear, not the kind that freezes, but the kind that sharpens. They begin to notice her at odd moments. A maneuver smoother than expected. A climb held longer than physics seems to allow. A silence in her breathing when others gasp through turns too tight for steady lungs. You watch her find rhythm in a sky that tries to crush every rhythm. No heroics. Only endurance. Only the soft, persistent refusal to yield. Stalingrad becomes the place where she dissolves into the war and re-emerges changed. Still quiet, still small, still carrying the softness of someone who once sketched clouds, but now holding the sharpened edges of someone shaped by fire. You see her sit alone some nights, tracing absent circles on the fabric of her glove, eyes reflecting the faint glow of distant flames. Not dreaming, not remembering, simply enduring. They do not call her anything then. Not White Lily, not Ace, not Symbol. She is just another pilot in the cold. One more shape in a sky crowded with ghosts. One more breath held between rising engines. But beneath that anonymity is the beginning of something the war has not seen before. A presence, a steadiness, a quiet that does not break. And the sky, ruined, turbulent, ruthless, begins to take notice. The girl who looked up before the war looked back. You return with her to a place untouched by smoke, a Moscow that still breathes in full color. Snow gathers softly against the window frames, trams hum along their tracks, and winter sunlight stretches across rooftops in pale, tired bands. The air is cold enough to sharpen every sound, but gentle enough to feel like a childhood the world hasn't yet taken. They remember her moving through these streets with her head tilted upward, studying the sky the way others study pages in a book. Most children watched birds, weather, the drifting of snow. She watched contrails, the thin scratch of aircraft stitching the clouds, a kind of distant promise in motion. You see her in classrooms, sketching wings in the margins while teachers speak of literature and arithmetic. Her pencil moves with quiet certainty. The clouds above Moscow have already begun teaching her something no one else can articulate. She grows up in a modest apartment where the radio murmurs through thin walls, where books are stacked in corners, where winter coats dry by the stove. Life is small, simple, warm in the ways ordinary families make warmth. But her gaze is always pulled upward, toward the pale, unreachable distance. They notice it before she does, the way flying fits her, not as a dream, not as ambition, but as an extension of breath. When she joins the Aero Club, it is without ceremony. No proud declarations, no gathered crowd. Just a quiet girl stepping into a hangar filled with the scent of oil, cold metal, and possibility. You watch her first lessons unfold with a kind of inevitability. The hand on the control sticks steady sooner than expected. The eyes reading the horizon with unforced understanding. The way she leans into the wind as though listening for something beneath it. They teach her the fundamentals: trim, angle, lift, stall, recovery. She absorbs them with the patient focus of someone who does not need speed, only altitude. Flying feels natural to her, not because she is gifted, but because she is attentive, and attention is its own kind of brilliance. Years pass. The world grows dark. You feel the shift before she does. News spreading through kitchens and stairwells, maps changing color, families lowering their voices when certain names are spoken. The air in Moscow thickens with tension long before the first bombs fall on distant cities. They see neighbors disappear into the machinery of the purges. They watch newspapers twist themselves into tighter shapes of certainty. They hear rumors moving ahead of truth like shadows before dawn. Her father is taken during this time, quietly, efficiently, without answers. No one tells her what to believe. No one tells her how to grieve. The loss leaves a thin, hard line inside her. It does not turn her bitter. It turns her inward. And the sky becomes even more important, the only place large enough to hold what she cannot speak. When war arrives in 1941, it does not announce itself. It simply drops across the country like a curtain. You feel the weight of it through the city's breath, the sudden rush of evacuations, the shuddering of trains carrying families east, the stunned silence of crowds watching plumes of smoke rise from the direction of the front. Germany moves fast. Too fast. Entire airfields burn before aircraft can rise from their rows. Entire units crumble under the shock of the first assaults. They lose so much so quickly that the sky becomes a place of absence, patrols missing, names erased, contrails that never return. And in the hollow of that loss, new regiments form, not out of hope, out of necessity. You watch her step through the gates of the Women's Aviation School as if she has been walking toward it her entire life. The other volunteers carry nerves, bravado, eagerness, fear. She carries only quiet purpose. They train together through cold nights and harsher mornings. They share bunks, rations, stitched gloves. They learn discipline in silence rather than noise. You see her in the dim barracks, adjusting her harness with deliberate movements, studying maps with the same stillness she once gave to cloud sketches. Her instructors note her precision, her restraint, her refusal to waste breath or motion. When the order arrives assigning them to the front, she does not look away. She simply breathes, a steady inhale, a steady exhale, and gathers the few belongings the war has not yet taken. The truck that carries them towards Stalingrad rattles over frozen roads, through forests stripped of leaves, past villages already half emptied by fear. Snow gathers in seams of clothing, melts on warm breath, freezes again. You sit beside her as she watches the sky through the canvas flap. Thin winter light splinters across passing branches. The air grows colder the farther east they travel. They speak softly in the back of the truck. Fragments of home, fragments of dread, fragments of wishes they no longer say fully aloud. The road bumps. The horizon stretches. The war grows closer. She keeps her hands inside her sleeves to stay warm. She keeps her thoughts close to her chest to stay whole. Ahead waits the city where her name will eventually change shape. Not yet a symbol. Not yet a whisper carried across regiments. Not yet the white lily. For now, she is only a pilot traveling toward a broken horizon, breathing in the cold that will soon define her. They run drills until their lungs burn, formation changes on frozen ground, emergency procedures shouted over the wind, parachute practice that ends in stiff, awkward landings. Later, they climb into cockpits that smell of fuel and canvas and cold oil, learning the feel of instruments under gloved hands. You watch her settle into each new aircraft with the stillness of someone greeting an old language spoken in a new accent. Control column, rudder pedals, trim. She moves through the checklist not with haste, but with a calm urgency that wastes nothing. Around her, others shiver, fumble, adapt. Her motions remain steady. They notice. The war has not yet reached them directly, but it is already thinning them out, shaving away what cannot endure. Beyond the training field, another current runs. You catch it in glances from nearby male units, in the way conversations dip when the women pass, in the slight tightening of jaws at the idea that this sky, their sky, will now be shared. They question quietly whether these new pilots will hold, whether they will panic when the tracers appear, whether they are here because the country is desperate, or because someone made a mistake. She walks past those doubts without slowing. They sometimes test her in subtle ways. A suggestion tossed lightly that perhaps the heavier maneuvers are better left to others. A comment about strength, about reach, about endurance. These things drift across her path like smoke. You notice how rarely she answers them directly. Her response lives in the air. On gunnery days, the pattern of her hits is tight, controlled, economical. On formation flights, she holds her slot with unwavering discipline. On emergency drills, she moves first, not through recklessness, but through readiness. They start falling quiet around her, not out of deference, but because there is less and less to say. Nights carry a different kind of silence. They learn they will be leaving this place of repetition and drills. They will be joining active regiments. They will be flying where the sky is already full of debris. The word Stalingrad moves through them like a drop in temperature. You feel the breath tighten in a few throats. You see hands flex inside gloves. You hear the faint shift of weight from one foot to another. For her, the name settles in with the inevitability of a destination she has unconsciously been moving toward for years. There is no burst of fear, no outward stiffening of posture, just a subtle narrowing in her gaze as if some long, distant line has finally come into focus. They are given little time to absorb it. Missions don't wait for comprehension. By the following morning, bags are packed, aircraft reassigned, records updated. The training field will receive new arrivals soon enough. The process is continuous. The war eats and eats. Before departure, one more test appears, not official, not written anywhere, but understood by everyone present. You find her on the runway facing off in a mock engagement with a seasoned instructor. The others watch from a distance, arms folded against the wind, eyes narrowed. They have seen many students try to hold their own against veterans. She refuses the obvious moves. Instead of chasing easy openings, she waits. Instead of reacting to each feint, she holds her line, reading the currents of air the way she once read cloud patterns. The instructor attempts a dive meant to pull her into a mistake. She does not follow. He climbs, trying to drag her into a stall. She cuts the angle, preserving energy. You feel a new rhythm forming, not the aggression of someone trying to impress, but the patience of someone who understands that survival in the sky is built from small, quiet refusals to be rushed. When they land, the watching group has no need of formal assessment. The result hangs in the air like the last echo of engine noise. They have seen enough. And above it all, a single aircraft passes overhead, not Soviet. Its engine note vibrates through the tents like a question with only one possible answer. You sense her spine straighten just slightly. There is no welcome, no ceremony, no hands extended in reassurance. Stalingrad does not greet. It endures. They climb from the trucks, stretching stiff legs, adjusting straps, wiping grit from their coats. A faint wind sweeps across the field, carrying the scent of fuel spilled hours ago and the distant metallic taste of river mist. The Volga is somewhere beyond the smoke, unseen but present like an old sorrow. You move with her toward the makeshift command tent, boots sinking into frozen mud. Around her, aircraft stand in uneven rows beneath camouflage netting that barely disguises their exhaustion. The machines seem as tired as the men who tend them, patched, scraped, hollow-eyed. A few soldiers glance at the new arrivals. Not curiosity, not hostility, something closer to resignation. They have seen too many fresh faces become names etched into scrap metal before winter ends. Inside the tent, the dim light gives everything the color of ash. Maps cover the table, not crisp, accurate maps, but ones softened by hands and worn by hurried updates. Lines shift daily. Mechanics show them where to store their gear. A medic points out where stretchers are lined for the wounded. Someone gestures toward the trenches dug between tents, shallow cuts in the earth where people throw themselves when the sky explodes without warning. They absorb all of it quietly. But Stalingrad doesn't wait for absorption. The first air raid arrives before they have even found their bunks. You feel the vibration before you hear anything. A low hum, distant at first, then swelling until it fills your chest. The airfield changes in an instant, bodies dropping low, shouts muted into urgent motions, the metallic clank of guns being loaded. They scatter toward the trenches. Coats brush against mud. Boots slip on frozen ground. Breath breaks into visible clouds. Overhead, silhouettes move through the smoke. Blocky, heavy shapes, the kind that carry destruction in their bellies. The earth shudders as the first bombs fall somewhere beyond the ridge. The sky flashes in strokes of pale fire. She crouches with the others, knees pressed into the cold. No panic, no trembling, only breath, thin, steady, held between ribs as though each inhale must be rationed. They wait in that trench, pressed shoulder to shoulder, listening to the sky tear itself apart. The ground vibrates with each impact. Dust rains down from the lip of the earth above them. Somewhere, a flare pops open and spreads a sickly light across the ruins. Then the engines pass. The light dims. Silence returns, not gentle, but exhausted. They climb from the trench, brushing dust from sleeves. Already, the airfield feels older, as if another year has passed in those few minutes. Later, as they settle into their assigned quarters, you sense her take in the space with a slow, measured glance. The canvas walls ripple with the wind. The wooden cots creak under uneven weight. Somewhere outside, a generator coughs once, struggles and fails. She sets her bag down without ceremony, pulls off her gloves, presses her palm lightly against the rough fabric of the tent wall, as though feeling for something buried beneath it, a rhythm, maybe, or a grounding pulse that might guide her into tomorrow. They move around her, trying to place themselves in this new world. Some sit heavily on their beds. Some begin unpacking with frantic precision. Some stare at nothing. You watch her breathe once, deeply, as though preparing her lungs for the air she will now inhabit. Stalingrad waits outside, quiet for the moment, but never truly still. A mechanic tightens the last bolt on a panel and steps back, wiping hands on a rag that has seen too much. No words reach her. They don't need to. The machine is tired but willing. That is enough. Around them, engines begin to stir to life, not all at once, but in scattered coughs and growls that rise into a chorus of vibration. The ground trembles lightly beneath boots. Exhaust heat wafts through air still gripped by cold. The order comes draped in understatement. A patrol. Nothing unusual. Just a look along the river, a glance across smoke-worn factory roofs, a reassurance that the morning isn't hiding something worse. The ground falls away in fragments of grey-brown earth. The river stretches like a wounded ribbon. The sky opens in a way that does not feel like freedom, but like exposure. From above, Stalingrad looks unreal, a landscape that should not exist, a place unstitched from itself. Smoke curls in twisting columns. Roofs are gone. Streets are lines drawn in ash. Tiny flashes erupt along the riverbank where artillery feels its way through the ruins. They fly in loose formation, wings rocking slightly in the uneven air. No jokes through the radio. No bright chatter. Only breathing. Only engine strain. Only the thin hiss of wind slipping across canopy glass. You sense her waiting for something, not danger specifically, but clarity. The sky here has rules, patterns, temperaments. It reveals itself only to those patient enough to listen. And then the rhythm breaks. A faint movement ahead, not cloud, not smoke, but something more deliberate. They notice almost at the same time. Shadows slipping low along the river, shapes too angular to be natural. Reconnaissance planes. Small, quick to vanish. Never alone. You feel her inhale, slow and measured, as if preparing the body for what the sky will demand. The formation adjusts without words, drifting into a quiet readiness. And she will answer, not loudly, not heroically, but with the quiet persistence that has begun to define her. The first kill, a weight that does not announce itself. You enter a morning that feels thinner than the ones before, a pale sheet of cold stretched tight across the ruined airfield. Frost webs the ground. Breath hangs in front of each pilot like a small ghost unsure whether to rise or disappear. They move slowly through the half-light, boots crunching frozen mud, scarves pulled tight against the river wind. The engines have not yet woken, but the air already carries their scent. Oil, dust, the metallic promise of movement. She walks beside her yak with the subdued stillness of someone listening inwardly. Her gloved fingers trail once across the wing, feeling the frost melt beneath her touch. Nothing in her posture suggests anticipation, only readiness, endurance shaped into posture. The briefing is short, spoken in the low, measured tones of people who no longer expect certainty. A sweep along the river, a check on distant smoke columns, a glance into skies where shapes sometimes flicker and vanish before you understand what they were. No one calls it dangerous. No one calls it safe. Above the river, smoke drifts like the memory of fire. The patrol unfolds in silence. They fly in loose formation, wings catching faint morning light. The wind hums against the canopy. Beneath them, the city lies in ruins, blocks of collapsed stone, chimneys without homes, roads that have become trenches. From altitude, it looks almost still, as if exhaustion has temporarily silenced even destruction. She scans the horizon with a faint, practiced patience the front has taught her, watching for what moves incorrectly, what glints at the wrong angle, what disturbs the usual pattern of cloud and smoke. And then it appears. A sliver of movement near the river bend, too steady to be debris, too sharp to be bird or shadow. They bank toward it, wings dipping simultaneously. The shape resolves. A reconnaissance aircraft, small and light, slipping low along the water as if hiding in the folds of the landscape. She narrows her gaze. Reconnaissance planes do not travel alone. The air thickens a moment later. A subtle pressure change, a disturbance in the light, and something drops from above. A fighter. Fast. Predatory. The yak angles upward, metal groaning in protest as she pulls into a climb the aircraft can barely sustain. For a moment, her body compresses under force, breath stolen into a thin gasp that never escapes her throat. The enemy flashes overhead, so close the color of his fuselage flickers across her canopy. She rolls beneath him, a controlled, unhurried movement that matches his angle, not fighting the physics but folding herself inside them. The gun sight drifts into alignment with no flourish, no rush. A breath, a squeeze, a brief thread of vibration through the wings. The rounds find him, not decisively, not violently, just enough to change the shape of his flight. Smoke unfurls from the engine. The aircraft wavers. The dive breaks apart. The enemy pulls into a failing climb, then into survival, not combat. A small, solitary figure drops away a moment later, parachute blooming weakly against the grey morning, and the sky becomes quiet again. There is no cheer, no shouted recognition, only the slow recalibration of the formation as they sweep the area once more. Her breathing steadies against the inside of her mask. Her shoulders settle a fraction lower. Her grip on the controls remains unchanged. She does not look at the falling parachute. She does not track the drifting shape. The front records everything, but no one approaches her with praise. Here, survival is not victory. It is simply continuation. She brushes mud from her glove, removes her helmet, and lets the wind touch her face, cooling the places where tension has left its mark. Her expression does not shift. Only her gaze grows slightly more distant, as though she is listening inwardly for a sound that hasn't yet faded. The front has taken notice of her. The sky has taken notice of her. And the war, patient, indifferent, has placed its first true weight on her shoulders. She carries it the way she carries everything, quietly, evenly, without letting it bend her posture. Transfer orders, leaving the city that burned her into shape. You feel the change begin not with an announcement, but with a silence. A morning arrives when the artillery seems farther away, when the smoke over the river drifts without urgent purpose, when the mechanics look up from their tools with expressions that resemble something close to confusion. Stalingrad has not softened. It never does. But it pauses, briefly, in the way dying fires sometimes hesitate before collapsing inward. They sense it too, the subtle shift. A thinning. A breath the city almost allows them. She stands near her yak with her gloves tucked under one arm, studying the sky as if listening for the faintest tremor. The air is brittle with cold, the light stretched thin across frost like diluted metal. For once, the horizon does not pulse with immediate danger. That is when the courier arrives. No ceremony, No explanation. Just a single sheet of paper carried with the weary urgency of someone who has delivered too many of these messages to too many exhausted units. The order passes through hands until it reaches the commanding officer. A quiet moment follows, the kind that folds itself inward, as if the entire field understands something is about to break its rhythm. Then the news spreads without words. The regiment is being reassigned. South. To the Kuban front. You feel the air tighten around the understanding. Stalingrad was a crucible. Kuban will be something else entirely. Open sky, wide valleys, mountains that sharpen the wind, and an enemy still confident in its own skill. They look at one another in that muted way soldiers do when the next chapter of hardship reveals itself as simply another doorway to walk through. She stands very still. Not surprised, not shaken, just listening inwardly, as though a long thread inside her has tugged slightly, guiding her toward a place she has not yet seen. The preparations begin immediately, though the field still carries the heavy imprint of Stalingrad's violence. You move with them as they pack kits, coil straps, repair what can be repaired and abandon what cannot. The ground is littered with things too damaged to take. Bent propellers, torn canvas, fragments of metal that once belonged to aircraft now erased by winter and fire. The mechanics work as if clearing a space inside their own exhaustion. Tools clatter. Engines cough under inspection. Wings are folded, crates sealed, tents stripped down to their frames. She moves among the activity with quiet focus, folding her flight scarf, tightening the straps of a small bag, checking her pistol with the same methodical calm she applies to pre-flight routines. The others glance at her from time to time, not seeking reassurance, but measuring themselves against her steadiness. In Stalingrad, she became something more than another face in the formation, not a symbol, not a legend, just a presence that did not waver when the sky demanded too much. Now they will carry that presence with them into a new war. Departure begins before dawn. You stand with her at the edge of the airfield as a faint sliver of light spills over the broken factories. The ruins glow weakly, as if the city is exhaling the last warmth trapped in its stones. Smoke drifts upward from unseen fires, blending with the low morning fog until the horizon looks bruised. Engines start one by one, not with the familiar, strained protest of Stalingrad, but with a steadier, deeper confidence. These machines have been reinforced, repaired, rearmed. They are not healthy, but they are willing. She climbs into her yak with slow, deliberate movements. The metal is cold against her gloves. The seat holds the imprint of countless sorties flown in desperation. You feel her hesitation, not fear, but a kind of farewell to a place that has carved itself into her bones. Stalingrad was brutal, but it shaped her. It thinned away everything unnecessary, leaving only discipline, instinct, and that strange, quiet resilience that others lean toward without knowing why. She fastens her harness, checks her instruments, settles her breath. The engine catches. The propeller dissolves into a spinning haze, and the ground begins to slip away beneath her. From above, Stalingrad looks less like a city and more like a scar, a long, dark wound stitched with smoke and silence. The Volga glitters faintly through the haze, reflecting a sun that has not yet managed to warm anything it touches. She circles once, almost imperceptibly, as if acknowledging the place where she learned endurance. Then she turns south. The land opens beneath her in shifting patterns. Frozen forests, empty plains, thin roads carved by retreat and advance. They fly in a loose chain of shapes against the widening sky, engines humming in uneven harmony. The air grows clearer mile by mile. The smoke thins. The horizon stretches. She feels it gradually, the sky letting go of its Stalingrad weight, and replacing it with something sharper. Expectation. Challenge. The tension of an open battlefield waiting to be drawn upon. The Kuban front is somewhere ahead, beyond the thawing fields and dark rivers. A place where German aces carve spirals into the air, where entire formations clash in wide arcs of metal and breath. A place that will demand precision rather than desperation. A place suited to the kind of pilot she is becoming. As they continue south, the sun pushes higher, turning frost into mist that rises like small ghosts from the earth. The wind shifts, no longer carrying the scent of burning stone but the clean, cutting smell of early spring. She adjusts her course, breath steady, eyes narrowed into the light. Stalingrad falls away behind her, not forgotten, not forgiven, but absorbed into the quiet core of who she now is. Ahead lies a sky that will test her differently, a sky she will not just survive, a sky she will shape. First contact with the aces, the sky learns her name. You enter a morning that feels newly made, as if the world has shed part of its winter skin. The air is clearer here than in Stalingrad, thinner, brighter, edged with the cold bite of mountains rising somewhere beyond the line of sight. They move across the airfield in small groups, adjusting straps, shaking stiffness from limbs, studying the sky with the quiet unease of people learning a new language. The Kuban front is different in every way. The horizon doesn't feel crushed. The light isn't choked. The sky is wide, open, exposed, an expanse that reveals everything and forgives nothing. She stands beside her yak, feeling the unfamiliar breeze press against her sleeves. The engine beneath the cowling vibrates with a deeper confidence than the battered machines of Stalingrad. This aircraft has not survived a siege. It has survived travel. The difference is subtle but real. You sense her measuring the air with her breath, searching for the rhythm of this new battlefield, not trusting it yet, not resisting it either. The others glance her way from time to time, as if checking whether her steadiness has traveled south with her. It has. It always does. They brief quickly. No long explanations, no elaborate maps. Just a sweep over the valley, a climb to altitude, a watchful eye for approaching formations. The tension is familiar, but thinner, not desperation. Anticipation. She fastens her harness with calm precision, glass fogging at the edges of her mask. The sunlight glints across the canopy, turning the interior into a narrow chamber of light and shadow. Engines rise around her. Propellers blur. Wings tremble. And then the yak is moving, wheels bouncing once over uneven ground before lifting cleanly into the new sky. Altitude changes everything. Beneath them, the valley stretches in muted greens and greys. Watchtowers prick the horizon. Rivers carve thin lines through thawing fields. The mountains loom at a distance, their edges sharp enough to cut the morning light into fragments. You follow her into formation, wings leveled, breath steady, eyes scanning the upper layers where danger tends to gather. The air is smoother here, but not safer. It carries sound differently. It carries movement differently. And soon, it carries the distant shapes of aircraft. They appear first as faint specks above the mountains, tiny sparks of sunlight on metal. More than one. More than a few. A formation too disciplined to be anything but German. JG-52. You feel the shift ripple through her formation. Not panic. Not excitement. A quiet tightening. Shoulders drawn slightly inward. Breath pulled thin. Hands settling more firmly on controls. She narrows her gaze. The shapes resolve into fighters, descending in a slow, deliberate arc. Predators do not hurry. They descend toward what they intend to claim. She knows this. They all know this. The Luftwaffe has not been weakened here. These are veterans, pilots who survived the West, the early East, the long sweep of the front. Their confidence is its own kind of weapon. The first pass comes without flourish. A single 109 breaks formation, angling downward like a falling blade. No warning. No sound except the shift in air pressure as he cuts through it. She tilts the yak slightly to feel the motion better. Not reacting. Reading. The clash is immediate and quiet. No shouted orders. No frantic weaving. Just a series of clean, sharp movements. A bank to avoid the first diving strike. A rise to maintain energy. A shift in formation as the squad spreads without breaking apart. The enemy is skilled. Angles chosen with care. Dives timed to exploit inexperience. Turns executed with the easy cruelty of long practice. But she does not falter. You feel her patience more than her aggression. Her steadiness more than her fear. She lets the first pass slip past her, not chasing, not flinching, simply allowing the motion to unfold. The 109 curves upward, expecting her to react prematurely, to give him an opening. She doesn't. He rolls over the top and dives again. This time, she moves. A measured bank. A controlled climb. The yak rising into the thin light, not aiming for advantage, but removing herself from the trap the enemy is trying to set. He follows. He must. Predators follow motion. But the angle is wrong for him now. Too steep. Too exposed. A fraction of a fraction misaligned. She recognizes it before he does. A small slip of space. A breath. She takes it. Not with a dramatic dive. Not with a violent roll. Just a quiet rotation into a better line, the yak sliding into an arc that aligns her sight with the space the enemy will occupy in 3 seconds, not the one he occupies now. She waits inside the breath between moments, holds the line, steadies her lungs. The enemy passes through that space exactly when she expects him to. A gentle squeeze. A brief shudder of metal. Her rounds find him, not to destroy, but to disrupt. His engine coughs, trailing smoke. His climb fails. His confidence fractures. He breaks off. He lives. But he leaves the fight. The others see it. They register it. They reshape the engagement around the fact of it. But no one celebrates. This sky is too large for triumph, too old for pride. She circles with the formation again, breath fogging faintly inside her mask. The yak hums beneath her, not triumphant, just warm from exertion. Below, the valley stretches in muted colors, unaware of anything that has unfolded above it. The German formation regroups at a distance, reconsidering angles. They will return. Of course they will. But today, the sky has seen her. And the aces of the Kuban, pilots forged in other fires, confident in their own mastery, have felt the first faint disruption of a presence they cannot yet name. She doesn't smile. She doesn't exhale in victory. She simply finds her place in the formation again, shoulders steady, gaze forward. The sky is beginning to change its shape around her. A name that spreads in whispers. You follow her through the early days on the Kuban front, and you feel something shift around her. Not suddenly, not loudly, but in small, almost invisible adjustments in how the world reacts when she moves. The sky has grown larger here, yet somehow she occupies more of it. They notice first in the way formations settle more cleanly when she takes her position. A wingtip drifts closer, trusting her steadiness. A pilot glances her way before committing to a steep climb. A younger flyer mirrors her breathing before takeoff without realizing he's doing it. None of it is spoken. Speaking would make it too fragile. Instead, the airfield absorbs the truth quietly. Her presence changes the shape of the sky, not with force, but with calm. The days stretch long beneath the bright, indifferent sun. Engines roar in bursts. Tools clang against metal. Field kitchens leak thin steam into the wind. Every sound seems sharper here than in Stalingrad, as if nothing has been softened by smoke. She walks through this sharper world with her usual composure, not drawn, not tense, simply attuned. People track her without realizing they do. A mechanic pauses mid-motion as she approaches, wiping his sleeve across his forehead before tightening a bolt with unnecessary care. A logistics clerk straightens a stack of papers when she steps into the tent, though nothing needed straightening. A pilot leans slightly closer during briefings when he knows she's nearby, as if trying to absorb whatever it is that steadies her. None of them name it. None of them could, even if asked. It is not admiration. It is not awe. It is the quiet gravitational pull of someone who endures without noise. You sense it most in the air. The way she moves on patrol has changed. Not more aggressively, not more boldly, but with a precision the others begin to use as reference. They calibrate themselves to her rhythms. Her climbs are measured. They become measured too. Her turns are patient. They become patient too. Her instinct for when the sky is about to tighten becomes the unspoken cue for everyone around her to breathe slightly differently. She doesn't intend this. Influence is not her pursuit. But the sky recognizes what ground seldom does. Consistency becomes leadership long before anyone speaks the word. Evenings bring a different kind of recognition. The airfield glows faintly with lantern light. Engines cool in long rows, ticking softly like tired hearts. Pilots sit on crates or lean against the wings of their aircraft, shoulders slumped, boots dusty with miles of grass and earth. They exchange fragments of the day. A burst of flak that came too close. A cloud that hid the sun at the wrong moment. A strange sound in the engine that vanished as quickly as it came. When she joins them, the conversation does not stop. It quiets, not out of discomfort, but out of recalibration, as if the tone adjusts itself to her presence. Someone mentions a glimpse of her yak holding off a German dive long enough for a damaged plane to turn home. Someone else recalls seeing her silhouette high above the valley, poised just outside the enemy's reach. None of them say her name. Names make things real. Real things become vulnerable. Instead, they speak sideways. A figure in the sun. A steady wing. A breath that didn't break. You hear truth tucked into every half-remark. A rumor begins to move across the regiments. A small, quiet rumor shaped like a pale flower. It does not start with decoration or rank. It starts with the faint chalk sketch someone draws on the corner of a map. A lily, nothing more. No petals shaded. No stem. Just an outline. Someone else repeats the gesture later on the side of a supply crate, then on the edge of a tent pole, half hidden beneath frayed canvas. It's not celebration. It's superstition. A mark that means, someone flew well here today. Or, someone came back. Or, someone held the line long enough for the rest of us to breathe. They never say she is the flower, but they look at her aircraft a little differently when passing by. You sense her noticing, not with pride, not with discomfort, just an awareness that attention is a currency the front spends carefully, and she has become expensive. In quieter hours, when the field settles into a brittle calm, she sits beside her tent with her notebook open on her knee. The others expect tactical sketches, diagrams of maneuvers, notes on enemy patterns. But her pages hold only clouds, thin cirrus lines, heavy layered masses, broken shapes drifting apart, remnants of a world she lived in before the war decided her trajectory. Someone passes behind her, slowing slightly as if expecting to see medals drawn there instead of weather. She closes the notebook gently. The war takes almost everything. She keeps this one softness tucked away like a secret she refuses to surrender. What grows around her is not fame. Not yet. Not really. It is something quieter. A recognition that the sky behaves differently when she is in it. Formations feel steadier. Fear loosens its grip by a fraction. Silence doesn't feel quite so heavy. The regiment doesn't need to say it. The front doesn't need to record it. The truth moves on its own. She is becoming a presence in the air. Not a myth. Not a symbol. Just someone who does not waver. And in a war that feeds on wavering, that alone is enough to make others lean unconsciously toward her. Quiet fame. Lilies in the margins of war. You move with her through the days that follow, and something subtle begins to take shape, not around her directly, but in the space people leave when she steps into a room, in the way conversations bend slightly when her shadow crosses the edge of the tent. Attention, here, is never declared. It accumulates. They don't celebrate her flights. They don't speak of her precision openly. Somewhere in the enemy's briefing tents, someone has begun describing a pilot who does not behave the way they expect a Soviet fighter to behave. Too patient, too controlled, too quiet in her movements. They do not know her name. They do not need it. The sky carries its own rumors. By now, the regiment has accepted what they will not say aloud. She is becoming something more than a pilot, not a symbol. Symbols demand distance and ceremony. She possesses neither. Not a legend. Legends are loud. She is silent. They grow closer to one another because the sky keeps trying to take them apart. It begins in small ways. A scarf folded carefully and left on her cot after a long sortie. An oil rag placed beside her yak before anyone else's. A tin of tea saved for her in a mess tent where scarcity rules every gesture. Not gifts. Not favors. Just attempts to anchor her to a life that keeps thinning at the edges. You sense her noticing each of these quiet offerings without leaning into them. Gratitude, here, is felt more through breath than words. She carries them all the same, tucked inside her silence like small stones. There is a pilot she flies beside more than others. But the war interrupts every speculation before it grows into something fragile. Connections here are not allowed to flourish. They are allowed only to hold. Nights bring a different kind of closeness. The regiment sleeps in long, narrow tents, cots arranged in uneven rows. The canvas walls ripple with wind that smells faintly of thawing soil and burnt fuel. Lanterns cast shallow pools of gold where faces soften briefly under half-dreams. Sometimes she sits awake while others drift. You feel her watching them with a kind of quiet tenderness she'd never admit, counting breaths, noticing tremors in sleep, listening for the small sounds that reveal who is carrying too much fear into morning. She has no language for concern, but she has a way of seeing. They trust that. They lean toward it without understanding why. As the air war intensifies, losses begin carving their marks. It happens gradually, like the wearing down of stone by persistent wind. A cot remains empty when dawn comes. A toolbox sits untouched beside an aircraft that will never fly again. A pair of gloves hangs on a tent pole longer than anyone wants to move them. They do not hold funerals. Time does not stretch enough for ceremony. They simply grow quieter, their movements slightly slower, their breaths slightly heavier. She absorbs these absences the way she absorbs everything, not outwardly, not with visible grief, but with increased precision. Each loss sharpens her. Each departure alters her rhythm in the air by a fraction of a fraction. You can feel it in the way she checks her instruments twice instead of once, in the way she studies the sky before takeoff with an almost aching attentiveness. He traces something in the dirt with a glove, an outline, a curve, a shape that might be a wing or a river or a memory. She watches the movement, but does not ask. This is how attachments survive here, unspoken, unconfirmed, born inside the narrow spaces war cannot crush. You feel something grow in the pause between them, not romance, not certainty, just the quiet recognition that their lives have begun to move in parallel. The wind shifts gently, carrying the scent of distant smoke. The moment ends before it becomes too large. Later, as the sun dips behind the hills and the temperature falls sharply, she returns to her notebook. Attachments form despite these risks. Thin, trembling threads stretched across the vastness of war. She walks them with care, with quiet, with the knowledge that they may snap at any moment. This is the Kuban. The sky gives nothing freely, and every bond formed here is a borrowed breath. The sky narrows, loss before loss. You feel it before anyone says a word, a shift in the way the airfield listens. Not fear, not shock, just a faint tightening in the spaces between breathing, the early, almost imperceptible pressure that precedes loss. The Kuban front grows louder with each passing day. Engines start earlier. Gunfire trembles through the ground more often. Smoke smudges the horizon in darker strokes. They do not talk about it, but everyone senses the same thing. The sky has begun to take interest in them again. Her wing partner arrives late to briefing one morning, shoulders hunched in a way you have not seen before. His gloves hang loose from his belt. His hair is damp with sweat, though the morning is cool. No one asks. No one needs to. The front has a way of marking people before it marks their records. She notices the change instantly. A stiffness in the way he lowers himself onto the crate. A slight tremor in the fingers that tie his scarf. A breath taken too sharply and released too slowly. Her gaze lingers for a moment, then drifts back to the map. You feel her drawing inward, tightening her own center of gravity, readying herself for a sky that has begun to pull at the threads they've woven. Their next sortie unfolds like a slow unraveling. The air is clear, painfully clear, the kind of transparency that makes every shadow, every glint, every motion stand out like a decision waiting to be made. Formation holds for the first kilometer. Wings glint in the high sun. The valley below curls in soft greens and muted browns. Then something changes. He flies slightly off balance. Not enough to alarm the others. Just enough for her to sense it. The faint skew of a wingtip, the subtle hesitation in a climb, the breath she can almost hear tightening inside his chest. The sky notices too. You feel its attention sharpen around them. A quiet, predatory awareness settling into the air like cold fog. A shadow appears high above, faint, quick, precise. A German fighter. Then another. They fall toward the formation with a cold grace of stones slipping into deep water. The engagement is brief, sharp, and uneven. She maneuvers with her usual restraint, turning just early enough to avoid a burst, holding altitude with a patience that frustrates the enemy, reading the angles with calm. But he is one beat behind everything, not visibly, just internally, a breath late in the roll, a fraction slow in the climb, a hesitation that has no sound but feels like a whisper pressed against the edge of the air. She tracks him once in her peripheral vision, a brief flicker of concern that does not break her discipline. But concern has no place in the sky. The fight ends without casualties. The Germans peel away, engines howling through the upper layers before dissolving into sunlight. But the damage has been done. Not to machines. To something quieter. They land in parallel arcs, tires skidding lightly across dust. Mechanics run toward them. The field vibrates with the residue of adrenaline. He climbs down slowly. Not injured. Just hollowed. She watches from a distance. Not staring, not intruding. Simply noting the way his boots sink heavier into the soil, the way he wipes his brow with a hand that trembles more than the cold would justify. Someone speaks to him quietly. He doesn't answer. Someone claps him on the back. He barely reacts. A silence forms around him. Not isolating. Just fragile. She senses it immediately. And she knows, in the way the experienced always know, that the sky has placed its hand on him. Not yet to take. Just to warn. The following days carry the same pattern. Small signs. Thin cracks. Quiet unravelings. He lingers near his aircraft longer than necessary. He sharpens pencils he never uses. He cleans goggles that are already clean. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that others would call fear. Just a person slowly losing sync with the rhythm required to survive here. She sees every detail, and she becomes even quieter. Her own movements sharpen. Pre-flight checks done with near reverence. Breathing measured in 3 slow counts before takeoff. Landing softer than the aircraft seems designed to allow. As if her precision could hold him in place through sheer steadiness. As if her calm could anchor him against whatever the sky has begun to pull from him. One evening, clouds gather low over the field, thick and heavy with the color of wet ash. The regiment stands outside, waiting for the generator to restart, the dusk pressing in from all sides. He sits on an overturned crate, gloves dangling from limp fingers. She approaches and stops beside him for a moment, not facing him, not speaking, simply sharing the thin strip of light that remains. You feel what passes between them, a recognition of the narrowing path ahead, the understanding that closeness here is measured not in words, but in the angles of proximity. He breathes in, breathes out, slow, uneven. She doesn't look at him, but her stillness is an answer. The sky will not wait much longer. That night, the wind picks up. Tents tremble. Lanterns flicker. Somewhere in the dark, an engine coughs once, as if dreaming of tomorrow. She lies awake on her cot, hands folded on her stomach, gaze fixed on the seam of canvas above her. The air feels heavy, charged. She knows what is coming, not because she has been told, not because she fears the worst, but because the war has a way of speaking in patterns only the attentive can understand. And she has always been attentive. Loss is already walking toward them, softly, quietly, choosing its moment. The sky is narrowing, and she, who has survived so much already, feels its breath press across her own. The taking, when the sky chooses. Morning arrives with an unsettling stillness, the kind that feels borrowed, as if the wind has stepped away only long enough for something irreversible to happen. The clouds hang low, flat and heavy, the color of wet stone. Even the mechanics move differently, their footsteps subdued, their voices hushed. You feel it. The airfield knows. The sky has made its decision. Her wing partner stands beside his yak, gloves already on, straps hanging loose from his harness. His posture is too straight, too rigid, the brittle sort of composure someone wears when they're trying to hold themselves together with angles instead of breath. He nods when she approaches. A small nod. Forced. Fragile. She returns it with the faintest inclination of her head. Nothing more. It is not comfort. Nothing here allows comfort. It is acknowledgement of fear, of inevitability, of the unspoken truth passing quietly between them. This might be the last time they share the same strip of earth. The briefing is short. A patrol across the upper valley. A climb to intercept shadows reported near the ridge. No one says, "Danger." They don't need to. Every person in the tent feels the tightness in the air, the weight pressing just behind the ribs, the silent warning in the way his hands tremble when he ties his scarf. Her eyes track the movement. Calm. Steady. But you feel her chest tighten beneath the surface. Not visibly, not outwardly, just a faint contraction of breath, so small it exists only in the space between heartbeats. They take off into a sky that feels too large for its own silence. Wings lift from the earth. Engines rise into thin, strained harmony. The valley opens beneath them like a wound half-healed. She holds her position to his right, not crowding, not guiding, but present. Another thread stretched between two lives that know it may snap. You sense the shift the moment they climb past the first layer of cloud. His formation wavers. Barely, but enough. A slight drift. A late correction. A breath caught in the wrong place. She adjusts to him without hesitation, realigning their arcs with gentle precision, masking his instability from the others, holding the shape of the formation together through sheer steadiness. But the sky sees all. The enemy arrives almost politely. A clean descent. A smooth formation. Angles chosen with cold, mathematical intent. JG-52 again. A larger group this time. Confident. Unhurried. Predators who recognize a faltering wing before it breaks. They dive. The first attack scatters the formation with brutal efficiency. Engines scream. Metal shakes. Light fractures into violent shards. Just the quiet, fatal kind of damage that steals the strength from a machine inch by inch. She sees it instantly. The faltering angle. The trembling nose. The way his yak begins to sag against the wind's invisible pressure. Her breath catches in her throat. But outwardly she does not flinch. She slides beneath him, matching his failing path, trying to steady what cannot be steadied. The enemy circles back. He tries to correct. You can feel the effort, the strain, the refusal. But the sky is done waiting. His engine coughs once, twice. A hollow, broken sound. The yak tips, just slightly, but enough to seal everything. The final moment holds no drama, no spiral, no fire, no shattered metal. Just a quiet, exhausted surrender as the aircraft slips from formation. A downward drift more than a fall, as if the sky is lowering him gently, as if gravity has reached up with open hands. She watches. She cannot break formation without condemning others. She cannot dive after him without creating another loss. So she holds her line, breath locked behind her teeth, hands steady on the controls even as something inside her fractures in silence. His aircraft disappears into the cloud layer, a slow vanishing, as if the sky is swallowing him with deliberate tenderness. Nothing returns. Not smoke, not sound, just absence, a shape missing from the world. Grief here is not communal. It is a private discipline. She removes her goggles, wipes frost from the edges, sets them gently on the wing. A small, careful movement that carries the full weight of what she will never say. The wind brushes past her, cold and indifferent, carrying no trace of him back toward the field. The sky has taken what it chose, and she must learn how to fly again, with one less breath beside her. Flight after loss. How grief changes the angle of a wing. You walk with her through the hours that follow, and everything on the airfield feels slightly misaligned, as if the world has shifted half a degree and no one has found a way to correct it. Engines sound harsher. Footsteps drag longer. The wind carries a bite that wasn't there yesterday. Loss does that. It rewrites the light. They tell themselves it was quick. They tell themselves he didn't suffer. They tell themselves it could have been worse. No one believes any of it. Most of all, her. But she carries the disbelief silently, placing it somewhere deep beneath her ribs where no one can see. When she passes the place where his yak used to be parked, the ground looks wrong, empty in a way that feels unnatural, like a missing tooth you keep touching with your tongue. Someone has already moved a fuel drum into the space. Someone had to. War doesn't leave gaps open. Even grief gets repurposed. She sits on a crate beside her aircraft, gloves tucked under her elbows, the cold pressing gently against her face. But the sky does not forget. Halfway through the patrol, a gust of turbulence hits the formation. Not strong, not dangerous, just the kind of shifting air that comes from mountain winds curling over the ridges. Everyone adjusts easily, except her. Not visibly, not externally, but internally. A small hitch in motion, a fraction of a second where breath falters. She recovers instantly, so quickly no one else notices. But you do. The sky does. And something inside her, something fragile and thin, tightens further. She is not afraid. She is not broken. She is grieving. And grief flies differently. After landing, her steps are slower. Not heavy. She does not allow heaviness. But measured, like someone tracing a pattern they need to understand before moving through it again. A pilot approaches her, stops a meter away, awkward in his concern. He starts to speak, then abandons the attempt and simply nods before walking away. It is the closest thing to comfort she will receive today. She doesn't mind. She never expected comfort from a place built to erase softness. That night, she sits outside her tent with her notebook open, pencil unmoving. The clouds she usually sketches drift overhead, long smears of grey blending into a darker horizon. Shapes she has always loved. Shapes she cannot bring herself to draw. Her fingers rest lightly on the page, as if waiting for a memory to settle there. Instead, only emptiness settles. She closes the notebook slowly, carefully, as if something inside it might break if she moves too quickly. The wind stirs her hair. The lantern behind her flickers. A distant artillery rumble rolls across the hills like a tired breath. She does not cry. Tears do not belong to this place. But her shoulders rise on a long inhale, and fall on a long, uneven exhale. It is the closest she will come to morning, at least for now. The sky has taken what it chose, and now it watches her, not with mercy, not with malice, with expectation. Grief has narrowed her world. Soon it will sharpen her, for better or worse. Clarity, when grief sharpens the horizon. The morning after her first true loss, the sky feels painfully open, as if the clouds have stepped back to reveal every inch of air she must now inhabit alone. The mountains are visible in sharp relief. The fields below glow with a cold, colorless light. Even the wind seems thinner, offering no softness to hold on to. She steps out of her tent with her collar turned up, shoulders squared, posture steady in a way that doesn't hide grief. It carries it. The airfield watches her without watching her. Mechanics glance and look away. Pilots tie their scarves too tightly. Someone stirs a tin of weak soup, arm moving slower than usual. Silence stretches between all of them. Not awkward, not fearful, reverent. Loss has passed through their camp, and she is the one still standing inside the space it left behind. She walks toward her yak. The ground crunches under her boots, thin frost breaking like brittle memories. A mechanic wipes his hands on his rag and steps away before she reaches them, not out of avoidance, but out of respect. The aircraft's metal gleams in the early light, frost clinging to the edges of the canopy. She touches the fuselage lightly, gloved fingertips brushing the cold curve as if reacquainting herself with an old truth. The machine does not mourn. It does not wait. It does not forgive hesitation. It simply receives whatever the pilot brings into the sky. Today, she brings clarity, the kind sharpened by the absence walking beside her. During briefing, she listens with an intensity the others can feel even from a few steps away. Not eagerness, not aggression, just attention so precise it alters the tone of the room. Her eyes stay fixed on the map. Her breath remains level. Her fingers rest still against her thigh. Nothing in her expression changes, but everything around her adjusts. The room becomes quieter, as if aligning itself with her steadiness. Her yak rises into the cold air like a blade being lifted from a sheath, cutting cleanly through pockets of turbulence. The others form up around her, instinctively giving her slightly more space than usual. Not out of fear, out of understanding. They sense the pressure inside her, the compressed clarity that comes only after part of your world has been quietly removed. She does not fill the gap. She does not compensate. She simply flies. Altitude rises. Clouds drift past in soft, slow sheets. The valley opens beneath them in muted greens and scattered smoke. She scans the horizon with a kind of focus that does not waver, not even when the wind buffets the wings. Her breath stays measured. Her shoulders stay level. Her vision stays clear. No searching, no straining, just presence. When the enemy appears, it is almost anticlimactic, a small formation moving toward them with practiced confidence, sunlight glinting off wingtips. JG-52. Experienced, efficient, accustomed to dictating the fight. They descend, expecting the usual reactions, tightening formations, jittered movements, the shift from caution into adrenaline. But she does not react the way most pilots react. She sees them the way someone sees weather. Patterns, not threats. Motion, not fear. She adjusts altitude by a few meters, nothing more. She angles slightly into the sun. She slows her breathing into a rhythm that steadies the hands. Clarity settles across her like a second skin. The enemy dives. She meets the moment without urgency, a turn executed at the exact second physics requires. A climb carved with the economy of someone who knows the edges of her machine as well as her own pulse. A burst of movement so controlled it gives the impression she is choosing not to chase, rather than unable to. She is not fighting them. She is reading them, and the sky bends quietly around her presence. Her formation feels it. The enemy senses it. Even the wind behaves differently, as if unwilling to disrupt a balance she has created through grief and precision. She spots an opening, a dip in the enemy's formation, a timing error so small only someone in her sharpened state could register it. She doesn't lunge. She doesn't dive. She turns with a slow, inevitable grace, arriving at the perfect angle not through force, but through patience. Her guns fire in a single, clean burst. A 109 shudders. Not a kill. Just a wound. A reminder. Then she pulls away, not pressing the advantage, refusing to give chaos the satisfaction of dictating her motion. The enemy withdraws earlier than expected, not out of fear, out of recognition. They have felt a different kind of opponent today. Not reckless, not eager, not emotional, precise, disciplined, quiet as grief. When she lands, the field watches her with a different awareness. No applause, no praise, just eyes that understand something has shifted. She climbs down, removes her helmet, takes a breath that trembles only once before settling. She is not healed. She is not restored. But the sky has changed its relationship to her. It no longer treats her as someone learning its language. It treats her as someone who has paid for fluency. She walks back toward her tent with steady steps, boots tracing the same path as always, but the imprint she leaves behind is subtly different, deeper, more defined. Clarity has arrived, and it will not leave her easily. Reputation, the shadow that forms before the pilot. You feel it first in the way people turn their heads when she walks past. Not fully, not obviously, just enough to mark recognition. Clarity has a scent here, a temperature, a way of bending the air around a person. She carries it now, not as pride, not as armor, as residue, the thin, invisible trace of someone who has stared loss in the face and returned not hardened, but sharpened. Mechanics work differently around her yak, more careful, more deliberate, hands steady, tools quieter, as if the machine has inherited some part of her calm. They don't say this out loud. They don't need to. The way they wipe frost from the wings, the way they double-check a latch, the way they glance at her as she approaches. All of it is admission without speech. Her aircraft is not just another machine. It's an extension of something they don't fully understand, but respect instinctively. Pilots begin adjusting to her rhythm before flights, scanning the sky the way she does, breathing deeply once before strapping in, folding maps with the same quiet precision. They tell themselves it's coincidence. They tell themselves they're improving. But the truth is simpler. She has become the standard they measure themselves against. Not through instruction, not through rank, through presence. The kind that grows only when a person survives the worst without breaking. Rumors continue their slow drift. Not about victories, not about kills. Those details matter less here than the intangible. Instead, they whisper about how she flew after grief, with lines too clean to be coincidence, with patience sharper than aggression, with a kind of stillness inside motion that unsettled even the enemy. Someone mentions that a German pilot broke off a dive early the day before. Someone else notes that their formation lasted longer without fracturing when she led the center line. A third mutters that her name was mentioned, indirectly, in a Luftwaffe briefing they intercepted. They never say her name aloud in front of her. Names have gravity. Gravity makes things vulnerable. But the whispers move on their own, tracing her outline long before she steps into any room. At dusk, as lanterns glow in small trembling halos, she sits alone beside her yak, repairing a seam on her glove with slow, methodical stitches. Her shoulders are relaxed, her breath steady, her gaze focused on the thread. Anyone passing by would think she is simply working, not knowing that this is her way of grounding things, of holding the world steady in her hands when the sky threatens to tilt. Pilots gather a few meters away, talking quietly, voices drifting through the thinning evening air. You notice something subtle. They angle themselves so she sits at the periphery of their circle, but never outside it. Not invited, not excluded, just known, acknowledged without naming, respected without ceremony. A presence around which others calibrate their movements. The enemy feels her presence too. It shows in the way their formations hesitate. A half-second pause before diving, a slight adjustment in altitude, a wider spacing than before. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but real. Predators sense when another presence enters their territory. Not one stronger, not one louder, just one absolutely certain of itself. Someone mentions a rumor that the Germans have given a nickname to an unnamed Soviet pilot who flies with unsettling discipline. A simple phrase. The quiet one. No one knows it's her, but the sky does. And she feels the weight of it all, not as triumph, not as satisfaction, but as pressure settling into her bones. Reputation is its own kind of threat. It walks ahead of her now, in briefing rooms, in enemy formations, in the glances of fellow pilots, in the way the airfield hushes by a fraction when she passes. She did not ask for it. She does not feed it. She does not even acknowledge it. But it clings to her, moving through the world as a second shadow, a silent messenger announcing her before she arrives. She remains herself, quiet, precise, attentive, enduring. But the war has begun to see her differently, and soon the world beyond the regiment will too. edges of a legend, when skill becomes something else. The first hints of legend arrive the same way dawn creeps across the valley, softly, quietly, almost unnoticed until the light has already changed. She doesn't feel different. She doesn't walk differently. She doesn't carry herself with anything resembling pride. But the world around her begins to behave as if she has stepped into a new form. The airfield watches her more closely. The regiment adjusts to her timing. The sky seems to widen when she climbs into it. And the enemy begins to hesitate. It begins as weather, a morning thick with haze, distant smoke blending with low cloud, sunlight diffused into pale, shapeless light. They rise into it cautiously, wings slipping through moisture, visibility shifting between clarity and blindness. She feels the air change first. Always. A slight temperature drop. A missing gust. A faint ripple beneath the wind's surface. She doesn't tense. She listens. The others sense her focus tighten, and instinctively they tighten too. Then the enemy emerges from the clouds like shapes formed out of breath. JG-52 again. Their silhouettes clean, disciplined, dangerous. Predators used to choosing the moment of death. But today, something is different. They descend toward her formation. And slow. Just slightly. Just enough to acknowledge a presence they no longer underestimate. You feel air thicken around her. Not fear. Not adrenaline. Just readiness. A quiet, sharpened kind. The engagement begins. Not with a dive. Not with chaos. With movement shaped like thought. The Germans split their formation, a classic tactic meant to fracture the Soviet line. But she reads it immediately, turning into their angle before the maneuver even unfolds. Her own formation follows with uncanny synchronicity, trusting her instinct more than the enemy's momentum. She rises into the sun, not directly, but along the edge of its glare, a place where the light bends, a place her eyes have always understood better than most. A 109 dives for her. She does not evade. She adjusts. A shift so small it looks accidental. The enemy overshoots by a margin too thin to measure. She holds fire. She always holds fire until it matters. Then, a single burst. Not long. Not frantic. A breath, released as metal. The enemy plane jolts, shifts, bleeds a thin trail of smoke, and breaks away. Not a kill. A control. She controls the sky, not through dominance, but through restraint. Two more fighters dive. She climbs between them, not to challenge, not to escape, but to disrupt their geometry. She turns their perfect angles into imperfect ones. She breaks their timing, their rhythm, their confidence. Her movements are not aggressive. They are precise, shaped by instinct honed through grief, steady in ways they cannot mimic. To them, she seems faster. But she's not. She's cleaner. Every action she takes is the action after fear, the one that remains when everything unnecessary has burned away. Her own pilots notice, not with cheers, not with commentary, but with breath, held, released, adjusted to match her timing. She has become something rare in the air, a reference point. A fixed star in a sky built to shift, something to orient toward when everything else tilts toward chaos. Even the enemy can feel it. One breaks off early. Another chooses distance over risk. A third circles, hesitant, watching her instead of attacking. Not fear, respect. The kind predators give to other predators. The engagement ends not with victory, but with quiet. The Germans withdraw, not in panic, not in defeat, but because they have met something that disrupts their certainty. She does not chase. She never chases. She holds position, stabilizes her breathing, and guides her formation home in loose, even arcs. The sky seems softer behind her, as if it knows she has earned a moment of gentleness. When she lands, there is no celebration, no praise, no applause, only a quiet shift in the way the regiment looks at her, a subtle widening of the space she inhabits, as though they are giving her room to grow into something she hasn't chosen. A mechanic whispers to another, "The enemy broke first." A pilot ties his scarf slower, as if considering something he cannot name. Someone has drawn another lily on the chalkboard, this one smaller, almost hesitant, as if aware the symbol is beginning to outgrow its corner. She wipes dust from her sleeve, checks the yak's wing for strain, and walks toward her tent. No expression, no swagger, just calm, precision, clarity. She does not know she has crossed a threshold, but the world around her knows. The sky knows. Even history, the part of it that will later exaggerate her name, has begun to take notice. Quietly, almost shyly, a legend has begun, not by ambition, not by proclamation, but by endurance carried so steadily that the air itself bends around it. The weight of being seen, when a legend outpaces the pilot. Legends do not arrive with fanfare here. They collect themselves in the margins, in the corners of briefing maps, in the way people step aside without noticing it, in glances that linger 1 second too long. And now, you feel one forming around her. Not a story, not a title, a pressure, soft, constant, unavoidable. Word travels through the regiment like ground fog. Someone in another squadron mentions a Soviet pilot in the Kuban who moves with unnatural calm. Someone else says a German ace mistimed a dive because of her. A mechanic hears that the enemy is asking questions about a yak that flies too clean to be ordinary. The details change with each retelling. A dive becomes steeper. A burst becomes longer. An angle becomes impossible. But the tone remains the same. Whoever she is different. The regiment doesn't argue. They've felt it too. But they are careful. They refer to her only in fragments. Her line yesterday, the way she held the turn, whoever was on that wing, as if speaking her name too loud might shatter the fragile balance she's carrying inside her. Names are dangerous here. Names catch wind easily. Names attract fate. She doesn't see any of this. Or rather, she sees it, but lets it pass through her without catching. Her world has become narrower since the loss of her wing partner. Sharper, quieter. She focuses only on what keeps her alive. Breath, angle, distance, light. Everything else is background noise. But the world around her refuses to stay quiet. Mechanics begin arriving earlier to prepare her yak. Pilots ask fewer questions when she speaks in briefings. A younger recruit watches her tie her scarf, then ties his own the same way. Small things, barely noticeable, but they accumulate, and with each one, the legend grows another thin root beneath her feet. The enemy's attention sharpens too. It shows in the way their fighters appear higher than usual, in the way they approach her formation more cautiously, in the way certain aircraft linger near her sector, hovering at the edge of engagement, as if studying her. One day, a 109 rolls inverted above her squadron, following their arc without attacking, a silent observation, not taunting, testing. She senses it, the kind of attention that does not bring flares or bullets, but something colder, recognition. The enemy does not yet know her name, but they know her presence, and to predatory pilots, presence is the first sign of threat. Back on the ground, the lilies begin to multiply, not drawn large, not boastful, just small, almost shy shapes scratched into the corner of a map, a fuel drum, the back panel of a toolbox, the side of a tent pole. Someone even paints a tiny one on the wheel cover of her yak, so faint it disappears in certain light. When she sees it, she pauses, not offended, not flattered, just aware, aware that something is growing around her, that she did not ask for, and does not claim. She brushes a gloved thumb over the edge of the petal, then turns away without comment. Recognition is not a comfort. Recognition is a risk. Nights grow quieter, not because the war has softened. It hasn't. But because people have begun to give her wide, cautious space, like stepping around a candle flame in a room full of dark. She sits alone with her notebook, drawing clouds with strokes that have become steadier, darker, more deliberate. Grief still sits just beneath her skin, but now it has changed shape, no longer sharp, but solid, like a stone she carries in her pocket. It keeps her anchored, it keeps her focused, but it also isolates her. The war respects isolation. It knows how to feed it. It knows how to exploit it. And the legend taking shape around her is only tightening that circle. One evening, as the wind drifts down from the mountains carrying the scent of pine and distant smoke, a pilot sits beside her for a moment, not close, not touching, but near enough to share breath with the same air. He tells her nothing. She tells him nothing. But the silence between them carries a message. People see you now, more than you might want, more than is safe. She doesn't move. She barely breathes. But something in her posture shifts, a small adjustment, like a wing correcting for a crosswind. She understands. The sky has begun to watch her more closely. The regiment too. The enemy too. Clarity has turned into reputation. Reputation has turned into expectation. Expectation is the heaviest burden of all, and she is carrying it without making a sound. Marked, when the sky starts aiming back. Reputation has a sound, not loud, not sharp, a faint tightening in the atmosphere, a small shift in how air presses against wings, a silence that feels intentional. You feel it the moment she steps onto the field that morning. The wind is too steady, the light too clean, the sky too calm. Calm here is never kindness. Calm is setup. Her squad stands in loose formation near the briefing tent, boots leaving shallow impressions in the dew-coated soil. The mountains glow with a pale fire as the sun tries to push through the thin morning haze. She moves through the group without seeking attention, scarf tucked neatly, gloves pulled tight, posture unchanged. But the air around her has changed. Pilots straighten a little when she passes. Mechanics step aside without meaning to. Someone quietly clears a crate for her near the briefing table. They don't do this out of admiration. Takeoff is smooth, almost ceremonial. A rise through clean air into a sky that feels too open, too exposed, too aware. Formation builds around her like ribs around a heart, lines tightening, spacing precise. She senses the tension quietly forming behind her, pilots adjusting slightly left or right, ensuring they do not drift too far from her arc. Not for protection, for alignment. They fly better when she leads. They know it. She knows it. The sky knows it. The enemy arrives sooner than expected. Shapes above the valley. A faint glint of sunlight along wings. A slow descent, unhurried, deliberate. Not hunting her formation. Calling for her. A German ace positions himself higher than the rest, angled in such a way that even the wind seems aware of his intent. He has come for the quiet one. You feel the recognition crackle between them, not personal, not emotional, something colder. A mutual understanding that skill has drawn a line between them, a line they are now expected to walk. The engagement begins with silence. He dives, she waits. Most pilots flinch, she adjusts. He overshoots by a whisper, she turns just enough to remain unreadable. Not confrontation, not retreat, a conversation of angles. He tries to draw her into a steep climb. She refuses. He tries to cut her off with a shallow dive. She redirects in a slow, patient curve. He attempts to force her into a blind turn. She slides into the sunlight's edge, vanishing into a glare he can't throttle through. Every motion she makes is deliberate restraint, the kind that unnerves aces, the kind that breaks their rhythm. Predators depend on rhythm. She denies him every beat. Her formation holds back, circling just far enough to avoid interfering, close enough to react if the sky tilts wrong. They watch her movements with breath caught in their throats, not out of awe, not out of fear, but because they understand. This is different. This is not another sortie. This is a duel the war has been arranging for weeks. And she is ready, not fueled by vengeance, not fueled by legend, but by clarity forged in grief. Clarity that can cut metal, if held steady enough. The duel tightens. Altitude falls. Clouds shear away in long white ribbons. He pushes harder. She bends without breaking. He dives deeper. She turns the dive into emptiness. He rolls violently. She rolls only when the moment demands it. He is flying with aggression. She is flying with intention. Aggression makes noise. Intention moves quietly. He cannot read her, and because he cannot read her, he cannot corner her. His frustration shows in the way his engine strains in high climbs, in the way he re-enters dives with too much speed, in the way his formation hesitates, uncertain whether to join or stay clear. She feels him faltering, not in motion, Impatience. Patience always breaks first. And then, for one breath-long moment, his angle opens a fraction too far. Just a sliver, a seam in the sky. She does not pounce. She does not dive. She slides into the opening with the inevitability of water finding a gap in stone. A brief alignment. A single breath. A short burst. Her rounds stitch across his wing. Not a kill. Not final. Just control. Again. He pulls away. Engine coughing. Smoke trailing thinly behind him. He does not return to the fight. Predators know when they've been answered. When she lands, the field is quiet. Not stunned. Not triumphant. Just quiet. A mechanic wipes his hands slowly on his rag. A pilot lowers his goggles with deliberate care. Someone murmurs that the German ace touched death's edge today. Someone else adds, "She didn't chase it, because she never does." Legend grows louder when the person inside it remains silent. She climbs down from the yak, removes her helmet, and brushes frost from her sleeve. Her expression does not change. Her breathing does not break. But the sky, and everyone beneath it, now understands something unmistakable. She has become a force the war can no longer ignore. And because of that, the war will come for her. Soon. Consequences. When reputation demands a price. The days that follow feel stretched thin, as if the sky is holding its breath. Pilots move through the airfield with heightened awareness, eyes sharper, steps quieter, voices tucked low beneath the rumble of engines. Not because the war has intensified. It hasn't. Not yet. Because she has changed something. She simply carries it, the way she carries everything, quietly, with even breath. With posture that hides nothing and reveals nothing. One morning, before briefing, she notices a mechanic lingering by her yak. He is not working, not inspecting, just standing there, hands on the cold metal, as if memorizing the shape of the machine, before it goes somewhere he cannot follow. When she approaches, he steps back quickly, wiping his hands as if he had a task to finish. But you feel it. He is afraid for her, not of her. The war has begun to choose its targets more carefully, and he knows it. Everyone knows it, even if no one says a word. The briefing is tense, not because the mission is unusual. A mid-altitude patrol, a sweep across the ridge, a return before dusk. Routine. But routine does not exist anymore. When the enemy is looking for someone specific, the officer's voice is firm, steady, but his eyes flick toward her twice. Quick glances, barely noticeable, except to her. She registers everything. Not suspicion. Not doubt. Concern. He doesn't want the war to take her next. Wrong. Not a scouting party. Not a patrol. A trap. She senses it instantly. Not from sight. Not from sound. From silence. The silence that precedes ambush. The silence that knows its target. The silence that already has her in its center. She banks hard left. Not evasive. Corrective. A German formation bursts through the upper clouds. Angles perfect. Speed precise. They are not diving on the squadron. They are diving on her. Someone recognized the quiet one, and they have come to erase her. Her squad breaks instinctively, split by urgency. Wings scatter. The sky fractures. But she does not panic. She does not rush. She listens to the attack. The first 109 comes in too fast. She shifts into the sunlight's edge, making herself a blur in the glare. He passes her by. Frustrated. Another tries to cut off her climb. She climbs anyway. Not high. Not far. Just enough to tilt the angle wrong for him. He peels away. A third dives low, clearly expecting the panic she never shows. She folds into the dive with a patience that looks almost unnatural. For a moment, she disappears into shadow. Then she lifts out of it, clean, silent, just outside his firing line. He misses. All three adjust. All three reform. They are not leaving. They are not discouraged. They are committed. The sky has issued its challenge. The legend must be tested. Her formation tries to help. They bank. They climb. They cut in at angles meant to relieve pressure. She sees it, appreciates it, but she does not rely on it. Reliance is how the sky takes more lives. She holds her own arc, her own timing, her own breath, and it keeps her alive. For now. But legends do not only attract danger. They attract cost. A young pilot, new, eager, still learning the language of the air, cuts too sharply across her line, trying to block one of the 109s. He succeeds for a heartbeat. Then the sky corrects him. The German ace doesn't shoot him down. He doesn't have to. A split-second miscalculation. A wrong angle. A burst of flak below the clouds. The yak shudders, tips, and slips downward in a soft, helpless arc. A motion too familiar, too recent, too cruel. She watches it happen. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a tightening of breath, a slowing of thought, a recognition. Her reputation has begun killing the people around her. Not through her fault. Through visibility. The sky is using her to draw fire. Using her to thin the ranks. Using her as bait. The enemy pulls away. Not because they are defeated. Not because they are satisfied. Because their task is complete. They have tested the legend. They have taken one life in the process. They will return. Soon. When she lands, the field is a wound. Pilots gather around the empty space, where the young flyer should have been. Mechanics remove a spare toolbox, as if tidying grief helps in some way. She steps out of her yak. Helmet in hand, eyes steady, shoulders level. No one looks at her directly, not out of blame, not out of anger, out of fear. Fear of what the sky will demand next. Because of her. Her reputation no longer shields her. It endangers everyone she stands beside. She stands alone for a long time, hands resting on the yak's cold wing, breathing slowly, evenly, as if anchoring herself against a tide that has begun to pull harder than ever. The war sees her now. The enemy sees her now. And the sky has changed the rules. The ascent, when the sky lifts you against your will. You feel it before she takes off. The field is too quiet. The air is too thin. Even the light has a kind of hold-your-breath sharpness. War has chosen a direction for her life now. Up. Always up. Not because she wants it. Not because she seeks legend. Because the sky has pushed her into a narrow corridor, where ascent is the only direction left. Mechanics stand farther back when she approaches her yak, not avoiding her, guarding space around her, as if she has become something fragile and powerful at once. A young mechanic sets a wrench down gently, almost reverently, as if afraid that sound alone might crack the silence she carries. Someone else steps forward as if to speak to her, then retreats before sound escapes. No one can say this aloud, but it's clear in the way they move. She is no longer just a pilot in their regiment. She is the person the sky keeps calling back. And the more she answers, the more they fear losing her. She doesn't notice the distance forming around her, or maybe she notices and refuses to acknowledge it. Either way, she moves with a clean, steady calm, the kind that belongs to someone who has accepted that the war is using her for something she didn't choose. Acceptance is quieter than grief, heavier too. In the briefing tent, maps stretch across the table like open wounds. Lines shift. Sectors darken. Arrows mark places where the enemy presses harder every day. The commanding officer's gaze lingers on her again. Not long. Not obvious. Just enough for her to feel the burden he wishes he could take, but cannot carry for her. Today's sortie. A deep intercept. High altitude. Aggressive enemy movement. Possible ace involvement. Everyone pretends it's routine. But she knows. High altitude means one thing. They expect her to handle the hardest part. She nods once. Calm. Even. Quiet acceptance of a responsibility she never asked for, but can no longer refuse. She walks out into the open field. The wind lifts the loose strands of her hair. The sun rests on her shoulders like a thin weight. Her boots leave small, precise impressions in the dirt. She touches her yak only once, palm flat against the cold wing, a gesture that feels less like connection and more like farewell to something soft. Then she climbs in. Her motions are fluid, measured, almost ceremonial. The cockpit closes around her with a familiar metallic sigh, and the airfield holds still, as if watching someone step onto a wire, suspended over a long drop. Takeoff is smooth, too smooth, as if the sky is clearing a path for what it wants from her today. Altitude builds quickly. The world beneath them dissolves into shapes. Fields, rivers, smoke, shadows, all distant, all irrelevant. At 3,000 meters, the air thins. At 4,000 meters, the wind sharpens. At 5,000 meters, her breath becomes a measured discipline. She climbs higher, because they need her to. She climbs higher, because she can. She climbs higher, because the sky keeps pushing, and she keeps answering. The enemy appears like a thought given form, at first faint, then distinct, flying with the controlled arrogance of pilots who assume superiority. JG-52. Experienced, dangerous, uncomfortably familiar. But today, something is different. She sees their formation, and understands it instantly. The angle of their descent, the pacing of their engines, the spacing of their arcs, the rhythm of their confidence. Not because she has studied them, because she has become something the sky uses to interpret threat. Clarity turns into intuition. Intuition turns into inevitability. She banks before they descend, not evasive, predictive, and the formation behind her, all those who trust her without knowing why, adjusts with a smoothness that feels preordained. The engagement is not a fight. It's a demonstration of what the war has made her. Her turns are not quick. They are correct. Her climbs are not high. They are timed perfectly. Her bursts of fire are not fierce. They are exact. She denies the enemy momentum. She denies them angles. She denies them rhythm. The sky bends around her, not out of reverence, out of recognition. This is someone who has learned to fly after losing what mattered. This is someone who breathes differently in danger. This is someone the war cannot easily erase. Two German fighters break off. One climbs too sharply. Another overshoots a dive. A third tries to trap her in a vertical loop, and ends up revealing his flank instead. She takes no kills. She needs none. Control is her weapon. Restraint is her armor. Her squadron feels it. The calm she radiates. The decisions that feel like instinct, but are born from discipline and grief intertwined. She leads them not with authority, but with presence, a quiet presence. The enemy keeps misreading, at their own peril. When the engagement ends, the sky feels thinner, lighter, emptied of something heavy. Her formation gathers around her in wide arcs, not closing in, not celebrating, just existing, in the space she has steadied. They do not speak through the radios. Silence is respect, and fear, and awe they will never name. Returning to base, she descends in clean spirals, her breath controlled, her posture unchanged. On the ground, people move toward her yak instinctively, then stop, not out of distance, out of recognition that she has stepped into something beyond them now, something the war has shaped, and the sky has claimed. She climbs down, removes her helmet, and exhales once, a long, steady breath that carries no triumph, only inevitability. She has ascended, not by choice, by necessity, and everyone knows what comes after ascent in war: a test, a cost, a reckoning. But for now, she stands in the fading light, quiet as ever, carrying the thin, heavy crown the sky has placed on her head. The beginning of the end, when the sky changes its tone. After her ascent, the airfield behaves differently, not louder, not prouder, quieter, the kind of quiet that appears before storms, before departures, before loss that hasn't yet found its form. It's subtle, a pause in the way boots strike the earth, a hesitation in how mechanics tighten a belt, a glance held 1 second longer while someone adjusts a map. People move around her as if aware that something in her trajectory has entered a final arc, though they cannot name why. But the sky knows, the war knows, and she feels it too. A faint tightening behind the sternum, a stillness at the edge of thought, a sense that her path has narrowed to a place she cannot turn from. She wakes earlier than usual, not by alarm, not by duty, but by instinct. She sits on her cot with her boots still undone, listening to the canvas walls rustle in the morning wind. Nothing moves outside. No engines warming. No voices. Just silence. Too wide, too hollow. She stands, ties her laces slowly, and steps into the cold air. The sky is pale, washed out, almost empty, as if holding space for something approaching. Her breath leaves her in a thin cloud. It disappears quickly. Even breath is reluctant to linger here today. During briefing, they discuss a high-risk patrol. The officer's voice is calm, but the calm has weight. More enemy movement near the river bend. More sightings of experienced aces. More reports of aircraft being lured into traps. He outlines the route. He outlines the altitude. He outlines the threat. No one looks at her while he speaks, but everyone feels where the danger is pointed. She studies the map without blinking. It is not bravado. It is acceptance. She has flown long enough to recognize when the war begins to tighten a circle, and the circle is closing around her. Her squadron watches her prepare her yak, not consciously, not obviously, but every time she steps past a group, voices soften. Every time she picks up a tool or checks a latch, someone's breath holds. The young pilots feel it most, the unspoken dread that comes when the strongest among them is being tested again. They don't know how to name the feeling, so they do not speak it. War is full of unspeakable things. Before takeoff, she touches the wing again. She has done this every morning, but today the motion seems slower, as if she is listening for something in the metal, a vibration, a warning, a farewell. Nothing answers. The machine is steady, unchanged. She climbs in, straps herself in, closes the canopy. Her reflection flickers in the glass for a moment, calm, composed. A pilot who has long since stopped expecting mercy from the world above. Then the engine roars, and erases everything but purpose. The sky greets her with unusual clarity. Clouds thin, light sharpens, horizon stretches in pale lines. It feels open, too open, as if the world is making room for a final movement. Her squadron rises behind her, a loose, breathing formation. They trust her. They follow her. But today their spacing is off. Not poorly flown, just nervous. They are aware of something she has not said out loud. She may not come back from one of these flights, and the war will not warn them which one. Halfway to the patrol zone, she feels the shift. Not visual, not auditory, a shift inside the air itself. The way light refracts. The way wind presses harder against the wings. The way silence grows thick at the edges of hearing. Something is waiting. Something practiced. Something patient. Something that knows her name without needing it spoken. When the enemy appears, they do not descend immediately. They hover at altitude, shadows against the blue, measuring her, as if preparing for a final test. A German ace, familiar silhouette, steady wings, controlled posture, begins to drop toward her formation, not diving, not attacking, descending with the inevitability of a falling star that knows exactly where it intends to land. Her squadron tightens in fear. She does not. She feels only breath, steady and thin, the same breath she used in Stalingrad, the same breath she used when grief shaped her sight. She tilts her yak slightly, aligning herself with the descending shadow, not challenging it, meeting it. The sky holds its breath. This is not a fight. This is a summons. The last great fight, the sky closes its hand. The ace descends with a steadiness that feels almost ritualistic. No aggression, no rush, no wasted movement. He is not attacking. He is selecting. She senses the choice being made, the same way she senses temperature shifts, or pressure changes, or the faint tremble of wind inside cloud. This is not a random clash. This is convergence. Two trajectories shaped by war, by loss, by discipline, meeting at a point the sky has been guiding them toward for months. Her formation tenses. A wingtip drifts closer to hers. A younger pilot readies himself for the break. But she remains, still, aligned, calm in the way only someone who has accepted the shape of their life can be. The ace falls another 100 meters, gliding as if carried by the breath of the world. Then he rolls into the sun. A move for professionals. A move for predators. A move for her. The engagement begins with a silence that feels like a held breath across the valley. She banks left, slow, controlled, letting instinct shape the arc rather than fear. The ace matches her, sliding into position with frightening elegance. He is good, experienced, patient, and perhaps most dangerous of all, unhurried. Predators who rush can be fooled. Predators who wait cannot. She feels the difference instantly. This is not one of the reckless young ones. This is someone who has survived long enough to recognize a threat that doesn't announce itself. Someone who has heard the whispers, the quiet one, the steady one, the girl pilot who doesn't react the way others do. He has come to see if the whispers are true. She turns into the wind, letting it slide along her canopy like cold breath. The yak hums in response, not strained, not eager, just alive between her hands. Her squadron tries to close the distance. She signals them off with a small shift in altitude, not an order, a request. They obey, not because of rank, because some moments belong only to those inside them. The ace burns through the first pass, tracers stitching empty air by centimeters. She drops without fear, letting his angle run long, letting his confidence stretch just past its comfort. He loops overhead. She waits, eyes calm, breath steady. The sky feels like a wire between them, thin, sharp, vibrating. His second dive is faster, sharper, the kind meant to break someone's instinct. She does not break. She slips beneath the dive, with a motion so precise. It feels pre-written, not escape. Alignment. Her yak rotates in a smooth, controlled arc. Her timing is perfect. Her breathing is perfect. Grief and clarity have made her so. She sights him. Not to fire. Not yet. She reads him. He feels the reading. And adjusts. Two minds inside metal. Two instincts shaped by survival. Following the same invisible line. This is not combat. This is conversation. Clouds gather low. Thin tendrils curling like fingers. The wind shifts. Disturbed by the spirals they carve through the sky. He tries to lure her upward. She refuses. He tries to force her into a low-speed stall. She answers with a climb so measured. It feels like a sigh carved across the air. He tries to bait her into chasing. She never chases. His frustration grows. She feels it. The small, almost imperceptible disorder. In his previously perfect lines. But she also feels something else. He is adapting to her. Rapidly. Dangerously. The sky tightens around them both. She pulls high into a sunlit arc, gaining altitude without giving position. He follows. Close. Too close. A risk for most pilots. Not for him. And not for her. The moment stretches thin. Their engines howl in a shared pitch. Their shadows collide on the valley floor far below. This is the height of her life. Not in triumph. Not in pride. But in pure connection with the world she has given herself to. She feels nothing but breath and light and metal. The ace dives again. This time he commits fully. The sky closes its hand. Her next motion will decide everything. The thin edge, when one breath changes everything. The ace commits. A dive so sharp it carves the sunlight into two uneven halves. A line of descent that speaks not of confidence, but of familiarity with the point where life and death overlap. The world narrows around them. Wind flattens. Sound thins. Even the clouds seem to retreat, as if giving space to something intimate and terrible. She watches him fall toward her, not in fear, not in awe, but in recognition. He is flying with the integrity of someone who understands. This is no longer about victory, but truth, and she meets him with the same. She banks right, a measured, almost gentle shift, that brings her into the path. He believes he has cut for her. Instead, she turns it into a different path entirely. Their motions align, not by accident, by design. Two arcs meeting inside a moment too brief to name. She feels him reading her, feels him adjusting, feels him closing the final centimeter of distance between understanding and mistake. She has always been precise enough to stay on the safe side of that line, but today the line bends, not because she falters, not because she is reckless, because fate, quiet and patient and shapeless, has begun its slow reach. He dives past her port wing, tracers cutting a thin, perfect seam across empty air. She rolls beneath him, inverting with a softness that makes the maneuver look accidental, when it is anything but. The yak responds instantly, obedient, alive, a mirror of her clarity. For one suspended breath, she is behind him, perfect alignment. She rises after him with perfect patience, slightly slower, slightly cleaner, slightly wiser. He feels he is losing. For the first time, he shows it. A fraction of overcorrection. A roll too early. A climb too steep. Small mistakes. Thin fractures. But fractures widen quickly at altitude. They break through a thin cloud layer, their wings cutting the mist into trembling shreds. Visibility drops. Color fades. Everything becomes the soft gray of half-remembered dreams. She listens to the sound of her engine. She listens to the wind. She listens for him. But the ace has disappeared. Not fled. Vanished. This is the danger of cloud. Silence becomes weapon. She steadies her breath. Stays level. Refuses to chase shadows. The yak hums. Nose steady. Wings taut. A moment passes. Then another. Then a shape emerges to her right. Fast. Sharp. Committed. He has found her first. His burst tears through the cloud, a streak of light and violence. She rolls just in time. Not fully. Not cleanly. One round grazes her wing. The metal coughing sparks into the mist. Another grazes the fuselage. A brief kiss of heat and force. She feels the impact. Not pain. Not fear. Just information. Her yak trembles. Not dangerously. Just enough to tighten her grip. She returns to level flight. Breath steady. Mind quiet. Even wounded. She flies with the same clarity. The sky gave her through grief. The ace circles back. Realizing she lives. Realizing she is still sharp. Still steady. Still reading him. The dual resumes. But something fundamental has shifted. For the first time in the entire war, she is flying with damage. The sky has moved its first piece. The engagement sharpens. They spiral downward through cloud. Wings slicing air that smells of ice and cordite. He presses harder. Now fighting with urgency. Instead of patience. She answers with restraint. Instead of panic. Their paths intersect. And separate. And intersect again. Each time. Her yak trembles a little more. Each time. Her corrections grow more precise. Clarity under damage. Calm under pressure. Truth under fire. She is flying better than she ever has. And the sky is watching. The final moment comes quietly. No alarm. No sign. No warning. Just a small, quiet failure. In the right aileron. A delay so slight. Only someone like her would even notice it. She notices. And because she notices, she understands. The next maneuver he forces will demand perfection. She will give it. But the aircraft cannot. Not today. Not with the wound it carries. Not with the sky closing the circle around her. She breathes in, slow, deep, steadying herself. For the most important decision of her life. And in that breath, she accepts something, quiet and devastating. This is where the sky wants her path to bend. Not break. Bend. Into what shape? She does not yet know. The final turn, when skill meets the boundary of fate. The aileron's hesitation is tiny, half a heartbeat, a whisper between motion and response. But in air combat, a whisper can become destiny. She feels it immediately, not as fear, but as a shift in the language of her aircraft. The yak has always spoken to her, in pressure, in vibration, in breath. Now it speaks in warning, soft, subtle, honest. She tightens her grip gently, as if steadying a friend, rather than commanding a machine. The sky around her thins. The cloud layer becomes gauze. Light filters in pale threads through the mist. The German ace reappears above, descending again, patient again, as if sensing she is wounded, but not yet weakened. He does not know. This will be the last turn she ever makes. Neither does she. She only knows the truth in front of her. The next maneuver must be perfect, and perfection, today, is beyond what her aircraft can give. She doesn't retreat. She doesn't break. She breathes. A long, slow inhale, to center herself in the cockpit, to find the last stable piece of clarity. Inside the storm, she aligns her nose toward the sun's edge, tilting her yak just enough to control the line of descent. The ace angles for a kill, not reckless, not triumphant, just inevitable. Two arcs moving toward the same vanishing point. He isn't rushing her. He's matching her rhythm. He knows she's good enough, that only patience will break her. He doesn't know. The yak is carrying a wound that cannot be flown through much longer. She moves first. A downward roll, smooth, deliberate, a maneuver crafted from years of discipline and grief and precision. But the aileron lags again, not by much, just enough for the plane to drift wide. On the arc she intended to carve tight, she corrects instantly, cleanly, better than anyone else could. But even perfection cannot erase physics. The ace sees the widening arc. His instincts sharpen. He adjusts position to exploit the moment she cannot fully control. She feels him reading her angle with the same clarity she reads his. This is not a duel anymore. This is alignment, the kind that only ends one way. She pulls into a steep climb, knowing the yak will protest, knowing the engine will strain. The aircraft shudders. The wounded wing trembles. The aileron hesitates again, just enough to warp the angle of ascent. She corrects. Again, again. Everything she is. Every hour in combat. Every lesson carved by loss. Every moment of clarity found in the darkest skies gathers into this one climb. If discipline could mend metal, the yak would be whole. If grief could sharpen steel, the wing would turn without hesitation. If will alone could rewrite physics, the sky would bend to her. But the war does not bend. Not for legends. Not for prodigies. Not for the girl who drew lilies in the margins and flew with silence instead of fury. The ace rises behind her, closing distance with the inevitability of a tide. His shadow touches her canopy. Her breath does not break. Her posture does not falter. She is still flying with the same calm that made her name whisper through both armies. She reaches the peak of her climb, the moment where she should roll cleanly into a counterturn that would expose his flank. She begins the roll. The aileron delays. Half a breath. Half a heartbeat. Half a second that decides history. The yak tilts too slowly, too wide. Too tired. The ace adjusts. With mathematical precision. He does not miss. Not because he is cruel. Because the sky has aligned the moment. His burst tears through her fuselage. A clean line of light across metal. A breath of fire. A bloom of smoke. The yak shudders. Buckles. Tilts. Still. She tries to control it. She tries to level the wings. She tries to stabilize the descent. She gives everything left inside her to tame the machine she loves. The yak gives everything it can, but its wound has become too deep. It rolls gently, almost softly, as if tired, as if apologizing. The cloud pulls them both inward, pilot and aircraft disappearing, into a gray so tender. It feels like mercy. The ace watches her vanish, wings steady, breath heavy. He does not chase her. He knows the fight has ended. Not triumph. Not triumph at all. Just an ending. Quiet. Inevitable. Shaped by skill and fate. Intertwined until the final breath. The descent, when the sky lets go. The moment the rounds strike, the world around her doesn't explode. It exhales. Light flashes. Metal shivers. Smoke blossoms in a thin, reluctant ribbon behind the fuselage. Then silence. A deep, uncanny silence that fills the cockpit, like a final, steadying hand. She does not panic. She does not gasp. She does not claw at controls. She simply breathes, a soft, controlled inhale that has carried her through every battle, every loss, every dawn she never expected to see. The yak continues forward, for a long, fragile second, as if refusing to accept what physics has already decided. Then the wounded wing gives way, a gentle failure, almost weary, and the aircraft rolls, not violently, not brutally, slowly, like a tired bird folding its wings, for the last time. Cloud swallows her. Grey wraps around the cockpit, muffling light, softening shapes, turning the world into a drifting dream. Inside the descent, she feels weight shift, from engine, to wings, to gravity, to her own chest. Every pilot knows this sensation, the moment when control slips, not dramatically, but inch by inch, until only breath remains steady. She keeps her hands on the stick, still correcting, still guiding, not because she believes she'll recover, because flying is part of her pulse now, inseparable from breathing. She will fly until she cannot. The yak trembles under her fingertips, a final conversation between wounded machine and unbroken pilot. For a heartbeat, the cloud thins. She sees the valley below, a blur of winter colors, greens washed pale, rivers reflecting cold steel light. The world looks beautiful, in that distant, unreachable way, only falling things can see. She adjusts the angle again, gentle, deliberate. Even now, in descent, her precision doesn't leave her. This is who she was, quiet, steady, disciplined, enduring, even at the edge of life. The yak begins to spin, not wild, not chaotic, a slow, spiraling drift, as if the sky is turning her. for one last look at everything she fought for. Wind slides across the canopy, in long, soft strokes. The sound is thin, and strangely comforting. She stays present, fully awake, fully aware. No fear, no regret, just clarity. The same clarity grief gave her, months ago, when she realized the air holds truth more honestly than the world below. Another thin patch of cloud breaks. She sees treetops far beneath her, snow-dusted, still, silent. The yak breaks through the last veil of mist, and sunlight touches the smoke trailing from her wing, a small, bright shimmer. That looks almost beautiful. The ground rises slowly, so slowly it feels unreal. She keeps her hands on the controls, not to save herself, to guide the machine she loved, to the softest end she can offer it. The yak answers, with its final strength. And absence hits harder than death. Death is final. Absence is a question. Questions are unbearable in war. Her wingman circles the last place he saw her, cutting wide arcs through cloud, eyes straining for any trace of metal, or smoke, or the faint glint of shattered canopy glass. He finds nothing, only silence, only the thin grey of sky, holding its secrets close. Another pilot widens the search pattern. Another climbs to check from above. Someone else calls her name into the radio, with a voice that trembles despite discipline. No answer. The kind that settles slow, like frost on skin. On the ground, the airfield shifts into a different kind of stillness. Not the usual waiting, not pre-mission quiet. A softer, heavier quiet that spreads through tents and hangars, like a cold fog. Mechanics stand beside fuel drums, without speaking. Pilots walk in slow lines toward the debrief tent, each movement deliberate, as if afraid sudden motion might break something fragile. Someone asks where she landed. Someone else says they never saw smoke. A third insists she must have bailed out. The guesses are soft, hesitant, thin. No one believes any of them fully. Belief is dangerous now. Her yak's parking space is empty. Not unusual. She is often the last to land, often the last to taxi in. Often the one whose return signals the end of a mission's fear. But today, the emptiness looks wrong, too wide, too bare, as if the airfield itself recognizes something missing and has shaped the dirt to reflect it. A mechanic sets down a toolbox, without meaning to. Another stares at the empty space so long he forgets to breathe. Someone draws a small lily on the edge of the clipboard they're holding, hands shaking as they finish the last petal. The commanding officer gathers the squadron. His voice is steady, but his eyes are not. He tells them what they already know. She did not return. Then he tells them what they need to hear. A search party will form, as soon as weather clears, as soon as terrain allows, as soon as the sky gives permission. Even as he speaks, you can hear the truth beneath his words. They don't know if she survived, but they refuse to accept she's gone. But thin things can still hold weight. Into the trees, when hope walks on fragile snow. Morning comes quietly, not sunrise. That would imply warmth, renewal, light pushing through darkness. This is just the world turning, the sky shifting one shade paler, the air growing colder. The regiment forms the search parties. In this half-light, no speeches, no orders barked, no urgency, only determination, the kind worn soft by fear. They move toward the edge of the forest, boots crunching the thin layer of new snow. The birch trees stand like rows of pale sentinels, their branches trembling in a faint wind. Someone carries her scarf. Someone else carries a lantern, despite the daylight. Another cradles a map with shaking hands, fingers lingering over the coordinates. Where she was last seen. They don't speak her name. Names make things real, in ways they're not ready for. The first hour feels like going through motions, tracks branches, disturbed snow. Hope sharpens painfully. They follow the faint impression downhill, toward a cluster of birch trees, leaning at odd angles, their trunks scarred by recent force. Something passed through here, recently, a heavy thing, a falling thing. The wind quiets. Snow stops moving. Even the trees seem to hold still. Someone lifts a lantern, even though the day is bright enough. Light catches on something ahead. Metal, fabric, a fragment of wing. They cannot tell, but they feel it. They feel truth gathering, like cold breath inside the chest. The search party slows. Steps soften. Posture stiffens. They move toward the trees, as if approaching a wounded animal that might still be breathing. They don't know what they will find, only that they must keep walking. The wreck, when truth waits in the trees. You follow them as they move toward the cluster of birch ahead. Branches pale, bark peeling in thin curls, their trunks leaning as if something has pushed through them, and then gone still. The snow here is disturbed in strange patterns. Not footprints, not animal tracks. Long, shallow furrows, as if something heavy slid, turned, resisted, then gave up. Breath clouds around them in small, uneven bursts. No one speaks. Sound would feel wrong here. They advance in a loose line, each step placed carefully, as if they are afraid of stepping on something they cannot bear to see broken. A lantern's light catches on something ahead. Not bright, not dramatic. A dull sheen. Metal partially buried beneath snow. The first thing they see is not the plane. It's the color. The faint, winter-washed green of paint beneath frost. The curve of a wing half submerged. The suggestion of a propeller bent gently inward, like fingers closing. Someone stops walking. Boots crunch once, then fall silent. The world narrows around the clearing. Snow, trees, metal, everything else disappears. You feel the air tighten in their lungs. One of them steps forward, knees reluctant, hands gloved but trembling. He sweeps snow away with slow strokes, as if uncovering something sacred. The shape of the nose emerges. The fractured canopy. A familiar line of fuselage. No doubt. No denial possible. It's her yak. What's left of it? The impact was not violent. You can see it in the way the aircraft has settled. No crater. No scatter of debris. You stay with those who move forward. It feels less like a search party, and more like a group of people, walking toward a conversation they have been trying to avoid. The trail grows weaker. A scuff here. A red-brown stain there. A place where snow is compressed, as if someone knelt, rested, or fell. They stand over that spot longer than the others. Someone stares at it, as if willing the snow to give up more information. It doesn't. They keep going, because they must, because not knowing is worse than the truth waiting somewhere ahead. The birch trees thin. The ground slopes gently downward. A fallen trunk lies across their path, its bark stripped clean by winter wind. Beside it, the snow is disturbed again, not by struggle, by choice, as if someone sat there, for a while. You can almost see it, a figure in a torn flight suit, breath clouding the air, back resting against rough wood, eyes fixed on a sky she once moved through with such impossible calm. Someone kneels, glove resting on the place where the impression is deepest. He closes his eyes briefly. He doesn't say what everyone is thinking. She was alive here, for a time. The trail fades beyond this point. No more clear depressions. No obvious blood. Only the occasional broken twig. The faint suggestion of weight. Pressing snow down unevenly. The search party spreads out, forming a wide, trembling line. Every step forward feels like stepping closer to an answer. None of them are ready to carry. Between the trees ahead, a darker shape waits, not moving, not speaking, just waiting. They move toward it, careful, slow, breath shallow in the cold. The truth is very close now. The forest can feel it. Not in the sanitized way stories sometimes pretend, but in the very real, deep, human way of someone who has fought too long and finally let her shoulders rest. Her eyes are closed, her mouth softened, her hands unfurled, not clenched. The cold did its work quietly. She met it with the same quiet. One of the pilots sinks to his knees in the snow, gloves pressed against the earth, as if steadying himself. Another covers his mouth with a trembling hand, breath fracturing in the cold. A mechanic who adored her yak steps forward and touches the edge of her sleeve, with a gentleness usually reserved for damaged wings. No one speaks. Words would feel like intrusion. Silence is the only language that fits the moment. They check for breath. They know there won't be any. Still, they check. One gloved hand hovers near her face, another near her chest, another touches her wrist, with a tenderness that breaks something. In everyone watching, nothing. Her body is warm, in only the places where clothing held heat last. Already, winter is claiming her. Someone bows his head. Another wipes at his eyes, as if the cold alone caused the sting. But there is no denial left. She is gone. Not lost. Not missing. Not fallen somewhere in the forest. Gone. Found. Held by earth. Not sky. They surround her slowly, forming a ring of quiet grief around her stillness. No one asks what to do next. No one suggests lifting her. No one rushes. They need the moment to settle into their bones. They need the truth to become real in the shape of winter air. The forest stands witness. Snowflakes drift softly from high branches. A bird shifts somewhere in the distance, its wings brushing against cold bark. Life continues, as it always does, when war takes someone quietly. One of them finds her notebook, tucked into her jacket. He hesitates. Opening it feels like trespass. Leaving it feels like cowardice. He opens it gently. The last page is half filled, a sketch of a cloud, unfinished, lines trailing off, as if she had been interrupted mid-breath. He closes it and holds it against his chest. The others step closer, not touching her, just close enough that their presence warms the air around her, if only slightly. For a brief moment, you feel something like a collective vow. She will not be left alone in this clearing, not even in death. They lift her carefully, hands synchronized, movements quiet. Even in death, she is carried with the same respect she once commanded in the sky. The lantern glows against her hair. As they begin the slow walk back to camp, snow muffles their steps. The birch trees part for them, and the cold forest holds its silence, not in indifference, but in mourning. The return, when the regiment learns what the forest already knew. They walk back in a single, uneven line, boots sinking into the snow, with a softness that feels almost reverent. She is carried between them, wrapped in a spare canvas sheet, face covered, hands folded with a gentleness reserved for people the world deserved, but never learned how to hold. The lantern swings slightly, casting warm, trembling light across the trees as they pass. The journey is slow, not because of the terrain, not because of the weight, because no one is ready to bring this truth back to the airfield that waited for her every evening. Every step is a negotiation between duty and heartbreak, between reality and the last fragile threads of hope. The forest thins, the valley opens, the camp appears ahead, tents in muted rows, smokestacks rising from mess stoves, air thick with the familiar smell of gasoline, frost, and tired breath. Someone sees them first. A mechanic pauses mid-step. A cloth drops from his hand. His posture changes in a way that ripples down the airfield like wind. Others turn, slowly, carefully, as if afraid they already know what the procession means. And they do. Long before the figures come close enough to see detail, the truth settles across the camp, like a winter shadow. They're carrying someone, and it can only be her. No one speaks. No one rushes toward them. No one collapses in grief. They just fall into silence, the kind that deepens the lines on a person's face, the kind that steals the heat from the air, the kind that belongs only to loss. Pilots remove their caps. Mechanics stand straighter. Even the wind seems to settle, giving them a stillness, soft enough for mourning. The commanding officer steps forward last. breath slow, eyes fixed on the canvas sheet. He doesn't ask. He doesn't need to. The search party lowers their heads. That is enough. They bring her to the med tent, the only place warm enough to offer her body a trace of dignity. The lantern is set beside her. Its glow catches the curve of her shoulder. Beneath the cloth, someone closes the tent flap gently. Outside, the regiment gathers in a loose half-circle. No formation, no order, just people standing close, because they cannot bear to stand alone. A mechanic sits on an overturned crate, wiping his eyes with the back of a gloved hand, as if the cold alone caused the sting. A young pilot stares at his boots, jaw tight, breath uneven. Another grips his scarf so tightly, the threads strain beneath his fingers. A woman from the quartermaster's tent carries a small vase and sets it beside the med-tent door. Without a word, she has no flowers to put in it, but she sets it anyway, because symbols matter when language fails. The commanding officer gathers them. He tries to speak, fails, starts again. This time, his voice remains steady, only because it has to. He doesn't talk about heroism. She never flew for heroism. He doesn't talk about legend. She never wanted legend. He talks about precision, discipline, respect, the quiet steadiness she brought into the sky. Every time the world expected noise, he talks about endurance, about breath, about the way she carried grief with such grace. It became a form of strength. Every word lands soft. Every word is true. When he finishes, no one applauds. No one moves. Silence is the only response, worthy of her life. Later, when night settles over the valley, and cold sharpens every sound, you see a line of lanterns placed outside the med tent, one by one, small flames glowing in fragile halos. No ceremony, no command, just people, honoring someone they loved, in the only way they know how, quietly. Echoes, how a life quietly becomes legend. In the days that follow, the airfield moves through its routines, with a slowness that feels almost ceremonial. Engines still ignite, maps are still unfolded, pilots still fly, war still demands motion. But the rhythm has changed. Something in the cadence of the place has shifted just slightly off-beat, like a song missing a single note that once held everything together. She is gone, and the absence settles deeper than the cold ever could. They clear her bunk, not all at once, piece by piece, a glove placed beside a folded coat, a scarf laid carefully across the bed frame, her boots aligned neatly at the foot, as if waiting for her to return and slip into them. Someone finds her pencil beneath the cot's wooden slats. They hold it for a moment, just a small, ordinary object, before placing it gently on her notebook. The notebook is opened only once, not to read, to confirm. The last page remains, exactly as the search party found it, an unfinished cloud, drawn in lines that grow fainter, as if her hand lost strength mid-stroke. They close it again. Some things are not meant to be interpreted. only carried. Mechanics return to their work with unusual softness. Tools are laid down quietly, wrenches clicked gently into place, engines tested with careful restraint, as if noise itself would be disrespectful. One mechanic leaves a small white lily, painted on the corner of her yak's parking space. Just the outline, nothing filled in. He doesn't tell anyone. He doesn't need to. Others add their own marks. In the days that follow, a tiny star scratched into a toolbox, a drawing on a fuel drum, a ribbon tied to a tent pole, markers of presence, for someone who will never walk past them again. Her squadron flies differently now. Not better, not worse, just altered. Formations are tighter, turns are more cautious. Breathing over the radio is steadier than before. They fly with an awareness of fragility that was not there until she disappeared into cloud. In the sky, no one speaks of her, but every pilot feels the absence of her steady arc, her quiet discipline, her instinct that shaped the air around her. Even the enemy notices. On the week after her death, a German ace pulls out of a dive he could have taken. Not fear, not mercy, recognition. Some adversaries leave a mark, even after they fall. Rumors begin to drift through nearby regiments. First, small details. The quiet one is gone. The girl pilot who flew like a shadow. Then exaggerations. She took 3 with her. She landed while on fire. Then myths. She vanished into cloud because the sky chose her. None of it is true. Yet all of it is. Myth forms where truth leaves space. Her truth is quiet, precise, disciplined, human. But myth needs volume, so others begin to supply it. In the evenings, pilots sit around small stoves, with mugs of weak tea, talking softly about sorties, and weather, and the future. They're not sure they'll reach. Someone mentions her name. Just once. It lands gently. No one winces. No one turns away. The silence that follows is not painful. It is reverent. She has become a presence inside absence, the kind that steadies people, rather than breaking them. One night, a letter arrives from a distant command post. Inside is a request for confirmation of her last flight. The commanding officer writes the reply, slowly, carefully, choosing each word, as if building something fragile. He does not use the word heroic. She would have disliked it. He does not describe the duel. That was hers, not the army's. He does not mention legend. He mentions precision, courage done quietly, discipline under damage, a life given without spectacle, a pilot who never sought glory, and never accepted anything less than the truth the sky demanded. He signs it. He folds it. He seals it. And in doing so, he gives history the version he hopes it will keep. But history rarely chooses truth. History chooses the story people need. And already, the story is growing. The night before the aftermath, a lantern burns outside her bunk. Long after the rest of the camp has gone dark, someone placed it there. and left without a word. It flickers softly in the cold wind, casting shadows that look like wings, not soaring, not rising, just resting, the way she is now, and the way she deserves to be remembered. Aftermath, the long quiet after the storm. You walk away from the airfield slowly, boots pressing into the cold earth, breath drifting in thin white strands. The world around you feels dimmer now, not darker, but softened, as if grief has taken a cloth and rubbed the edges of everything, until only the essentials remain. This is how loss fits itself into silence, not abruptly, not loudly, but by settling in the spaces where breath once moved freely. You feel the weight of it, in your chest, in the air, in the way sound seems to pause, before breaking across the valley. Behind you, the regiment moves quietly. Lanterns flicker outside the med tent, small halos trembling in the cold. Someone closes the door gently, the kind of gentleness people show only when the world has been asked to hold something fragile. There is no ceremony here, no speeches, no salutes. War rarely gives time for anything as formal as grief. Instead, it leaves people to navigate loss in their own quiet ways. A pilot sits alone beside a fuel drum, hands clasped, eyes distant. A mechanic wipes frost from a wing, as if it were her wing, as if keeping metal clean might keep her memory steady. Someone else carries her notebook, pressed against his chest, guarding it the way one guards something already becoming sacred. You keep walking. The sky overhead is clear now, pale and thin, almost translucent. It feels wrong somehow, too calm, too open, as if unaware that it has taken someone who deserved softness. But maybe the sky knows. Maybe this clarity is its way of mourning. Maybe the light is gentler because it remembers the girl who flew through it with such discipline and such quiet breath. You stop near the treeline, where the forest begins its slow climb up the side of the valley. Birch trunks stand pale and straight, their bark peeling in thin curls, like pages of unfinished stories. You imagine her sitting there, head bowed, breath thin, hands resting loosely in her lap, and something inside you tightens. She died with the same restraint she lived with. No theatrics, no spectacle, just a soft surrender to the cold that was already waiting beneath her skin. You inhale. The air enters cold and leaves heavier. It is strange how a person can shape a place so completely that even after they are gone, the landscape still feels full of them. You look toward the sky again. Thin clouds drift across the horizon, their edges glowing faintly in late afternoon light. She would have loved these clouds. She drew them constantly, in margins, in notebooks, in quiet moments before flight. To her, clouds were not obstacles. They were companions, markers of wind, teachers of movement. You see them differently now. You see them through the memory of her hands, tracing their shapes. You start walking again, following a narrow path that winds between low shrubs and patches of brittle grass. The world feels muted, as if wrapped in wool, as if waiting for breath to steady itself. Far behind you, someone begins humming softly, not a song, just a thread of sound, to fill the silence. It fades quickly. Silence returns, but it is no longer harsh, no longer empty. It simply is. You step over a fallen branch, your boot leaving a shallow imprint in the snow-dusted soil. Footprints are temporary. Memory is not. And she is memory now, the kind that lingers, without demanding attention, the kind that returns to you in moments when the world feels still. A gust of wind brushes past your collar. It carries the faint scent of pine and cold metal, a reminder of flight, a reminder of her. You pause again, letting the wind settle against your breath. The regiment will fly tomorrow. The war will move tomorrow. Names will be written and erased and written again. But some names refuse to fade, not because they were loud, not because they were celebrated, because they lived in a way that shaped the air itself. You feel that now, a subtle pressure, a fragile warmth, a soft echo, in the part of you that listens for things the world no longer says. You walk back toward the airfield. Lanterns glow in small circles of light. Shadows stretch long across the frost. Someone stands outside the med tent, scarf fluttering in the wind, head bowed. You know what they are thinking. You know how grief changes shape in the cold. You approach slowly, breath measured, steps soft. The night is coming, and with it, a quiet invitation to remember her exactly as she was, not a legend, not a symbol, not a myth, just a girl with steady hands and clear eyes, drawn to the sky because it spoke the language of her breath. You close your eyes. For a moment, the world feels still. The lantern flames flicker. The wind settles. The night deepens. And somewhere in that stillness, you feel her presence, not rising, not falling, just resting, a soft echo, carried on quiet wings, a memory that refuses to fade, a life that continues in every breath taken beneath this cold, endless sky. You've been part of echoes of war, where stories rise on quiet wings.